Evening. This study session of the Board of Education for May 5th, 2015 is called for order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. While our study sessions are generally limited to receipt of information from staff and discussion of that information and review of resolutions prior to a vote, at times we do conduct votes during study sessions. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. Director Buell is absent this evening. So we'll begin our agenda tonight with public comment. Ms. Houston, who do we have signed up tonight?
We have a total of 4, and our first 2 speakers, Paul Carlson and Maria De Silva.
So welcome, come on down. As always, we ask that you state your last name for the record and spell it. And you have a total of 3 minutes. The green light goes on at the beginning, the yellow light when you have 1 minute left, and when the red light comes on, we respectfully ask that you wrap up your comments at that time. We greatly appreciate you being here, and we are going to be looking forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And my name is Paul Carson, C-A-R-S-O-N. And I would like to thank you all for the message of inclusion that my family and I have received from Portland Public Schools since we first began planning for our son to go to kindergarten nearly 2 years ago. As parents of a child with Down syndrome, we'd been told to expect the worst. That schools would try to segregate our boy and that you'd have to fight tooth and nail to get him included in mainstream kindergarten. That has not been even remotely our experience. As soon as we began working with the district's transition coordinator that we were assigned to work with, we were greeted with compassion and a strong sense of partnership and unified goals, as well as the belief that inclusion for all students in the classroom community can improve social outcomes for both typical students and those with disabilities. The largest study of educational outcomes of 11,000 students with disabilities, the National Longitudinal Transition Study, showed that when students with disabilities spend more time in the general education classroom, they were more likely to score higher on standardized tests of reading and math, have fewer absences from school, experience fewer referrals for disruptive behavior, and achieve more positive post-school outcomes such as a paying job, not living in segregated housing, and with having a broad and supportive social network. These results were true regardless of students' disability, severity of disability, gender, or socioeconomic status. If you have a child with a disability, you probably know this and spend a lot of time explaining it to others. But what's just as important to emphasize is that the typical students benefit too. They grow up knowing a friend who faces challenges and who may be different. And they support them and learn together and try to figure things out. They learn compassion and diversity and to value everyone. And that's how they'll go about shaping their future and the future of their community. A future where everyone has a place and a chance to belong, that people with disabilities have a place in mainstream society. Classrooms are crowded and teachers are overtaxed. And what we've seen be incredibly effective in our son's kindergarten is a unified partnership between the classroom paraeducator and the teacher. The paraeducator isn't Bobby's helper or Mary's helper, but works with all the students, helping provide supports for all the kids who need them. But beyond that, supporting the teacher as a powerful resource makes the entire class that much stronger. That partnership, shameless plug for Roseway Heights, that partnership works. We're thrilled to hold up PPS as an example of how inclusion and acceptance are some of the strongest things we can ever help teach our children. You are definitely headed in the right direction, and I'm so proud our son is part of that future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I wanted to bring you guys a treat. Happy Cinco de Mayo. You might need an interpreter, so I don't know if you have an interpreter. I don't know if you know Cinco de Mayo is about the victory of people of color marginalized by the imperialist French. So this song is for you. Your staff just called the police on me last week. It's on video, it's in YouTube, it's in opt-out, enrollment education. So please do not call the police on parents, especially Latino parents. that we're trying to educate. So I'm looking for answers. Hopefully you will get some answers for me.
Excuse me, one more. Could you just state your name for the record, please?
Cuando la bailan todos aquí vienen. I'm a parent from Ringler and I came today to share my tradition. To share my traditions because you send the police on us. You send the police on us to kick us out of the school. Kick us out of the school and you need to listen. Can I sing in Spanish? It sounds terrible in English. Sorry, it sounds really terrible in English, so I'll go into Spanish.
Thank you very much.
Fan Major Project. This is Fan Major Generation Project. Viva 5 de Mayo!
Thank you. And the next,
Our next speakers, Greg Burrell and Dave Porter.
welcome, gentlemen.
Gonna sing for us too, Dave?
You want it first?
They call my name first.
Okay, go first. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Whew. Superintendent Smith, board directors, PPS employees, ladies and gentlemen. I testified at the last board meeting about forgiveness. And you know, some of my friends and colleagues warned me that I'd be seen as naive for even mentioning the subject, much less insisting that there will be little or no real change without it. If there's any question in my mind, it should be, are school district issues important enough to insist on forgiveness? Forgiveness for cutting budgets, for eliminating programs, for creating harms to children, teachers, parents, and communities? Or are they so minor in the scheme of things that we can just move forward to fix them? See, forgiveness is only the release of a hope for a better past. It says that as we move forward, we're not going to harbor anger and bitterness about things that have already happened. Unfortunately, the future is likely to resemble the past unless we act with all deliberate speed to change the system from the bottom up. See, the failure of policymaking at PPS is apparent to me from watching the number of problems created by having high school students take an 8-class schedule versus the number of problems we've solved. And we spent millions of dollars per year to pay for good men and women to create policy, then watch as policy created by those without the ability to immediately spot and correct errors creates chaos in the lives of students and their teachers. It takes 24 credits to graduate, so why insist that students be free to take 32, even if more are likely to fail, if there aren't enough teachers to provide the electives that make this option meaningful, and upper class students often spend a quarter of their day without a class. I'm going to make a bold proposal here. If implemented, I think this proposal will reverberate through public school systems nationally for years or decades. I want PPS to implement a system in which teachers at each building choose any administrator to be their principal, including those who have been promoted to supervisory positions beginning with the 2016-17 school year. I can think of no better way to empower teachers. The job of a great principal is to serve the needs of students, parents, the community, and teachers. By having teachers choose their leaders, we make this model explicit. And of course, beyond that, returning to the school board subcommittee system will ensure that school board members are fully informed on the policies they approve, and we can repurpose the salaries of the report writers for more building administrators, teachers, and other educators. Many of the programs, in my opinion, at the district level are less important than the jobs teachers do, and I'm looking forward to a system that truly prioritizes student needs instead of paying people to think about student needs, create policy about student needs, and communicate to the public about how students' needs are being met. So I don't want to take too long. So I just wanted to make sure that I said this before the election so that everyone who follows my words knows why I'm supporting the candidates who have my support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair Atkins, Superintendent Smith, members of the board, members of the public, my name is Dave Porter, P-O-R-T-E-R. Tonight I speak in opposition to resolution number 5083 for the developing a regional early learning academy and Longhouse Community Center at the Foster School site. I'm going to only hit some high points in my longer written comments that you have. I have the following concerns. One, the $4.5 million in funding from whatever sources could be better used for other higher priority facility refurbishing and expansion projects. I note the need for additional space for additional dual language immersion programs. In particular, the estimate for refurbishing Kellogg is in the $2 to $3 million range. Like the Foster site, Kellogg is also in the southeast region where additional classroom space is needed. This reads wrong. Kellogg contains 39 classrooms, 2 full-size gymnasiums, 1 with bleachers and a formal stage, 2 science labs, a full separate cafeteria, and industrial art rooms. Would not that be a better use of Portland Public Schools funds than spending $4.5 million plus on a new facility with only 6 PPS classrooms? 2, the addition, actual replacement of 6 PPS classrooms at the Foster site does not fit in any configuration of the PPS system of elementary schools in southeast Portland that I can envision. An educational facility with only 8 classrooms is too small to be used as a school. It has little general educational utility and can be used only for a small set of purposes, like childcare and pre-K. Over time, as needs change, PPS needs facilities with more flexible uses. PPS already has too many facilities that are too small. It does not need another. B, it would be better to build and locate additional pre-K classrooms at existing schools so pre-K can be a part of an elementary school. There is no cost advantage in building these 8 classrooms at the Foster site. C, which school would have its 3 kindergarten classes split off from the rest of the school to be placed at the Foster site? Where would the kindergarten students then go for first grade? D, would kindergarten at the Foster site be a dual language immersion program? E4, PPS needs the $4.5 million to convert some K-8 to middle schools and to reopen Kellogg. I do not think PPS can successfully reset the boundaries of all its schools without going to an all-middle school system. There is just no way to have cost-effective K-8s if they get extra funds to offer a selection of electives comparable to middle schools. Nor do K-8s have sufficient numbers of middle grade students to provide group classes like bands that require a minimum number of students to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you everyone for your comments and your songs. Now we're going to move on to our Bond Accountability Committee quarterly report. So I'd like to invite Kevin Spellman down to the table to present the report from the committee. Welcome.
Good evening, Co-Chair Atkins, Co-Chair Knowles, board members, Superintendent Smith. I'm joined today by Willie Paul, an invaluable member of our committee. Willie is the Executive Director in his day job, Executive Director of Capital Projects for Kaiser Permanente. So he brings a lot of really valuable experience to the committee. The BAC met on April 15 at Tubman School, which will be the new home of, at least temporary home for Fabian students. And directors Belial, Buell, and Curler joined us, and we appreciate that whenever you can make that. It's really helpful. There is an extraordinary amount of activity going on under the bond program right now. And I'm guessing that it's the most active time ever in design and construction for PPS. At this time, your staff is managing the following: closing out work at Marshall High School to prepare for Franklin students, close out of work in the improvement project 2014, which involves 6 contracts and 12 schools, bidding an award of IP 15, 4 construction contracts, 8 schools, bidding an award of IP 2015 science projects, 2 contracts, 18 schools, bidding an award of IP 2015 Maplewood, 1 contract, 1 school, bidding an award of Tubman campus improvements to prepare for Fabian, selection of a design team for IP 2016, which will involve 11 schools, completion of design and start of construction at Roosevelt High School, and several of you were at the groundbreaking on Saturday and had the opportunity to see the tent structure that will be the new gym. We have to remember to add structure to that term. Tent doesn't really do it justice. Completion of design for Franklin High School, and groundbreaking at Franklin High School will take place May 16th, and apparently there are some flyers back there. Completion of design for Fabian PK School, selection of design team for Grant High School, and preparation for master planning for Benson, Lincoln, and Madison High Schools. I think under any circumstances, that's an incredible amount of activity going on under this bond program. The immediate challenge for the summer work, IP 15, that involves 27 schools, is that the window of opportunity keeps getting smaller, apparently. I guess that's a good thing, because that means school's starting a little earlier in the fall, but 65 calendar days to do all this work, and that's a real challenge. Projects at Roosevelt and Franklin have reached major milestones with the agreement on their guaranteed maximum prices, and we'll talk a little more about that. The demolition at Fabian is just on the horizon. I guess we'll wait for the students to leave, but in the fall, we expect demolition to start there. Your performance auditors are almost complete with their second report, and I believe they're coming before you towards the end of May, and our committee will be getting a briefing on that on May 21st. So, current issues that the BAC has been paying attention to. the program budget has now increased to $525 million. And primarily, the two big pieces there's multiple small additions, but the big pieces, of course, are the $15 million from Concordia and the bond premium from the first bond sale. The second bond sale has now completed, and there will be additional bond premium coming out of that sale, which is good news for everybody. And at this point, the board reserve, the remaining board reserve of $10 million remains intact. The project budgets are a cause for concern. The committee spent quite a lot of time talking about market pressures on construction, and as I listed, we're starting in getting involved in a considerable amount of construction work. There's competition from the private sector. The good news, of course, is the economy is picking up. But there's a lot of competition in the private sector as well as the public sector. And your sister district in Beaverton is a prime competitor at this point. And we're not advocating moving away from any of the social goals that are involved in this construction process. But I think we do need to understand that some of the competitors don't have those goals, and that can, in a busy time, lead to a reduction in competition. So that's something to be paying attention to. The guaranteed maximum prices have been agreed at Franklin and Roosevelt. That's over $150 million. During the meeting, we had a lively discussion about the reconciliation process and how at design development stage of design, the estimates came in over budget. And so the designers and the contractors, along with your staff, had to work really hard to bring the scope back within budget. And there have been some in the community who've expressed concern about that process. Our view of that is that this is almost an inevitable process that is just part of the CMGC construction design sequence of events. There is an inevitable tension between the design and the budget. And that will always, if anyone's ever remodeled their kitchen, they know that. These projects are a little more substantial than that. And I think as we engage in future public outreach, I think we need to pay real attention to an education piece of that process so that people at the beginning understand what's laying ahead of them. There was a sense from some people in the public that they'd been promised some aspects of the projects, and some of those, quote, promises had to go away. And that's unfortunate. But I think it's important that if, to the extent we continue the public process, and I'm sure we will, we need to have an understanding of what's laying ahead. The other thing that really comes out of that is it really reinforces the decision you made some time ago to exempt those projects from the low bid process and to engage in CMGC. Because if we had designed and then bid and had these projects come in millions of dollars over budget, that would have been a serious, serious problem. Schedules, I talked about the 65 calendar days for IP15. That's a challenge. Both Roosevelt and Franklin in the balanced scorecard show that they are behind the baseline schedule. We've talked about that, I think, every quarter that we've been here. But now we're into the construction sequence, and at least the contractors, the CMGCs, are confident that they can bring these projects in on schedule. So we'll be tracking that pretty carefully. Land use approvals were an issue that we were concerned about, but they've been resolved. They're completed. And now the pressure is on at the city in getting building permits. And I know the staff is working very closely with the city. On the equity side, we talk about this most quarters as well. The MWSB involvement continues to lag on the construction side, but now, as we've said, every quarter we're expecting that to change now that CMGC comes into play. The challenge there in observing that will be that staff measures MWSB participation when payments are made, and there's good reason for that being the measure, but what we've asked staff to give us a report on the contracts that are written to MWSBs so that we have a good sense of what that percentage really is going to be, rather than wait till it's all done and then find out what it was. So it's been an intense quarter for your bond program staff, and if they thought that one was busy, the next quarter is going to be even crazier. We remain impressed by the quality and professionalism of your staff and the design teams and the construction teams that you've selected. Willie, you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add other than to concur with everything that Kevin has said. I think it's a very good representation of the Oversight Committee's position on the information that's been presented to us to date. As Kevin said, there's a tremendous amount of work. We had good debate at the last meeting about budgets, about cost forecasts, about scope, and the evolution is one that we deal with and struggle with every day, frankly, as market pressures continue to change, as costs continue to drive up, and as we try to manage against finite budgets, hard choices have to be made throughout that process. But admirably, the program management and the project management teams have done a terrific job. They're keeping their eye on the ball, and I'm confident that to date everything's being managed very well.
Thank you both very much. Any comments or questions from the board?
I had a couple of questions.
Dr. Regan?
Thank you very much. And I have to agree that it's amazing to think about the amount of work that is happening and that is going to happen this summer in the school district, and the fact that we're managing it pretty well is pretty exciting. So I had a couple of questions. One is, on the beginning of the memo that we got, there was a comment that Ted Wolf from Community and Parents of Public Schools asked the school district for a lessons learned report on the design process of Franklin, Roosevelt, and Fabian projects to date, which I really like that idea, especially before we move full bore into Grant High School and the next bond. Is that going to happen?
Yes, and actually I had a meeting last week with CPPS about this very idea, and we've already we're going to have a third party who does a series of focus groups and a survey, and of the to collect multiple perspectives on the projects we've just completed, with the idea that it's really informing the go forward. So yes,
Good.
We're working on it.
That'll be really helpful. I had another question on, under project budgets, you said all of the escalation reserve has been distributed to the project, so there is no remaining pot to draw from in the event of increased prices. So what is the impact of that on Grant High School?
My recollection, Director Regan, is that an allocation has been made to Grant High School from the escalation, and a further allocation, I believe, was made from the bond premium.
Okay.
So the intent, at least the intent that's been expressed to us, is that Grant High School will not be shortchanged as a result of this.
Okay.
The
So the way it was worded,
challenge-
I couldn't tell
yeah.
that that was the case. So.
The challenge when you allocate the escalation to a project is to frankly not have the designers design to that new baseline,
Right.
rather than use that to take care of the escalation. So But that's the nature of all of these situations. We were fearful right from the beginning that the escalation amount, I think it was $40 or $45 million, which sounds like an awful lot. We were fearful it was not enough, and fortunately the bond premium and some other sources have helped out.
Great. And I had another question. The last bullet on the second page talks about preparation for master planning of Benson, Lincoln, and Madison high schools. And it feels like that is late at this point, especially if we're going to be trying to bring in major partners, whether those are business and trade partners or PSU or whoever it might be. So do we have a sense of when this piece is going to be taking place? You know, again, the November 2016 bond is going to be absolutely cluttered with different initiatives, so we're going to want to get started early. So do we have can you talk to, one of you talk to me about the preparation for master planning?
And I'm going to
on
ask
those three high
CJ
schools.
Sylvester, who's our Chief of School Modernization, to come on up and walk you through that.
Good evening, Board. CJ Sylvester, Chief of School Modernization. The work that we're doing to date on the resolution that the board passed in late November, which was that we go ahead and proceed with master planning for Benson, Lincoln, and Madison for a potential November 2016 bond, is this. At Lincoln, we are currently in the process of doing two things. We have Echo Northwest doing a development analysis so that ultimately by the end of this fiscal year, the board can make a decision about whether or not we're going to move forward with any mixed use on that site or whether it's strictly going to be educational purposes. The other thing we're doing is currently negotiating a memorandum of understanding with PSU for some potential co-location of their facilities on the Lincoln site. At Benson, we have people in both in curriculum and in performance working on what the curriculum should be at Benson as we start moving forward. The Benson project's going to be a little bit different next school year as we move into it, because in addition to doing a master plan, the first thing we need to do is an education specification, because the education specification that we've done to date on high schools is for a comprehensive high school, not for a technical focus option. So the Benson work will essentially last the entire year, because we're looking at probably doing the educational specification work in the fall, followed by the master planning work in the winter and spring. Whereas at Madison and Lincoln, we have kind of the latitude or the luxury of doing that master planning work anytime between about September and June of next year. The intention is to have all three master plans complete by June of 2016. What we'll probably be doing in terms of the ballot measure is starting to have conversations with the board in January or February of 2016 as regards the nature and extent of what current assessed value is looking like, what different tax rates would look like, how all of that's stacking up against the potential for three high schools on the November 16 ballot.
Anything else? Dr. Morton.
Thank you very much for the presentation, as always. And as always, I take it upon myself to ask at least a question about our MWSB work, and we have tended to lag behind our aspirational goal. And for those of you in the audience, that's minority, women, and emerging small businesses. Those businesses that have not always had an opportunity to grow infrastructure like many non-MWSB businesses have, white-owned businesses. I'm interested in what we're doing specifically. I understand that the CMGCs are going to be sort of taking more work in the subcontractor arena, but I also know those are smaller bids that are happening. What are we doing specifically, though, to increase that so we're not lagging behind the next time you come and report out?
Director Morton, what we're doing on the IP work is the same as we've done on the IP work, and there's, as you know, there are legal restrictions for doing more than the good faith effort process. So there's no reason to expect, I don't think, any change in the performance in the bid work. from the beginning, we've said that the CMGC process allows for greater outreach and a more successful process. I have not seen the CMGC firms' procedures that they're engaged in, but I do know that they're both well-regarded firms, and they have a long history of working with MWSBs, and they've reinforced more than once that the aspirational goal is their intent at a minimum. Now, quite whether that will happen or not, we'll see. I'd be happy to get copies of their programs if you like, and I could give you a separate briefing if you'd like.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you to all the great volunteers, experts on this committee. We really appreciate your continued service. It's invaluable, and thank you to staff for all your hard work. And we're just, as always, thrilled to see the bond work continuing on time, on budget, and moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll shift gears from our informational updates to an action item around the foster site agreement with NAIA. The board previously heard and discussed this item at our April 20th meeting, and of course our partnership and work on this with NAIA dates back to 2012. Before we consider the resolution, Carol, Superintendent Smith, did you want to offer any comments up front?
I did, and they're brief, but I wanted to just say a few things about why we were excited about the Generations Project to begin with. And people in this audience are well aware that the district has been less effective in serving our Native kids and really looking for strategies that are meeting the needs of our Native students. We currently, our Native students have a 47% graduation rate in this district, which is the lowest graduation rate of any student group. Our Native students are the second highest in disproportionately being suspended or expelled from school. And we're very aware that 22% of our Native students in Multnomah County are living in foster care, so that the kind of stable home situation that you would want to support success in school is often needing additional support. So one of the things for us about Generations that was really exciting was the idea that it's addressing stable home situation, intergenerational community of support that's wrapping around students and helping support their success in school, starting with early learning, which allows PPS to do what we do and support kids to get the foundation they need to be successful in school, but also that with NAIA, we would end up having wraparound supports that follow them into their elementary schools into third grade. So we were really excited about what the opportunities to really leverage a partnership and do a much more holistic kind of a service model to support our Native students, what kind of promise that holds for us. In 2012, in an agreement with the City of Portland that was part of the city contributing to our general fund budget during a time of a huge budget deficit, we had the opportunity to have a property arrangement that was part of them contributing to our general fund. So back in 2012, began this partnership. In July of 2014, we had an incredible celebration that was part of Oregon Solutions Declaration of Cooperation that was signed by 17 contributing partners, including PPS, NAIA, the City of Portland, Oregon Housing and Community Services, the Oregon Governor's Office, the Oregon Department of Human Services, Oregon Child Development Coalition, amongst many others. And it was a day of, I think, just great intent to have something that will be unique nationally and really just a model program that lets us do business differently and really look at how we're able to support our Native students. So before we get into the technical conversation as we're moving through partnership agreement, I just wanted to signal the excitement that has been around this project for all of us. So, and just a welcome to everyone who's here in the audience today. And bear with us as we're working on the technical parts of this deal.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Smith. All right, so the board will now consider resolution number 5083, authorization to enter into agreements with the City of Portland and the Native American Youth and Family Center, NAIA, for developing a regional early learning academy and Longhouse Community Center at the Foster School site. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Director Knowles moves, and Director Belisle seconds the motion to adopt Resolution 5083. Ms. Houston, I believe we have wonderful lineup of citizen comment.
We have 6 speakers tonight, and our first 2, Joe Delaney and Hannah Morrison.
Welcome. Come on down.
Hello, my name is Hannah Morrison, Morrison. I'm from the Ojibwa tribe, and I graduated from NAIA Early College Academy in 2010. I came to NAIA to get involved with the independent living program, which helps foster youth like me transition from foster care into independence. I wanted to go to NAIA for these services because as a foster youth, I was placed in homes away from my community and my culture. I always felt like there was something missing in my life. By attending the ECA and receiving foster care services through NAIA, I got to learn about where I came from and encouraged me to be a leader in my community. Because of my work with NAIA as a youth, I was given the opportunity to work for the agency, and now I am an early childhood support specialist in our Chison Playgroup. Chison is an early childhood play and learn program supporting children 0 to 5 and their parents. Just as NAIA helped support me as a youth, I feel that it is important to have our youngest children supported by our early learning programs, so they have every opportunity to excel in their education. I would like to share with you an example of the power of our early learning program. In Chison Playgroup, I worked with a family who came to us because of involvement with child welfare. Throughout the support of our programs, Mom was able to regain custody of her children, and our program was able to provide services to support their transition. The family continues their involvement in the program, with their oldest attending our Head Start classroom, where she is thriving and engaged, and their youngest is registered for our Head Start classroom this fall. By supporting NAIA Generation Early Learning Program will allow us to continue our important work in this community and support families to guide their children so that, like me, they feel empowered to become the next generations of leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Joe Delaney. I'm Karuk, a community member, a father, and the chair of the NAIA Family Center Board of Directors. I've been a member of the board for the past 4 years. I originally joined NAIA after getting to see all the amazing things that they accomplish and the improvements that they make in the lives of our community. NAIA provides critical services to the most vulnerable families in our region. Its holistic services reach thousands of self-identified natives and non-natives. Last year, our educational program served more than 1,000 youth through mentoring and tutoring, family engagement activities, summer programming, cultural arts, college and career services, recreational sports, plus dozens of other services to ensure successful educational outcomes of our youth. Through our collaborative partnership with PPS, we've been able to increase the graduation rate for Native American students attending Portland Public Schools. While this is cause for celebration, the unfortunate reality is that the district graduation rate for Native American youth remains below 50%, demonstrating the need to do more. According to the Coalition of Communities of Color report, an unsettling profile of Native Americans in Multnomah County, 1 in 5 Native children are placed in foster care. The report also states that very few eligible Native children access early childhood education programs such as Head Start. More than 50% of Native children under the age of 5 currently live in poverty, and yet less than 10% of eligible Native students access Head Start. Native Americans are deeply concerned about their children's progress through school. We understand it to be on pathway out of poverty and to the improvement of health and well-being, as well as towards expanding choices and opportunities. We have a young community that is rapidly growing, but our opportunities are not keeping up. Our children and families continue to face educational and housing barriers and remain largely unemployed or underemployed. I know that each one of you and the district wants to help change this, and the Generations Project will move us in the right direction. This is the commitment our organizations have made to improve the lives of our children in the community. We've been working on this project together for about 3 years. There's been a substantial investment of time and work committed to this project by the city, the district, and especially NAIA. We finalized the plan for Phase 1 and secured the funding for housing portion of the project. With your support tonight, we can continue moving forward with Phase 2 and keep this project going. We have many partners committed to this project. Our partners in philanthropy are ready to support us. Private donors are ready. They all believe in strengthening our community through this innovative project. NAIA's Board of Directors is supporting Generations, and we encourage your board to join us in making a smart investment in equity and early learning. If you're committed to closing the achievement gap, you won't delay this project and will allow it to move forward. We have a chance to do something very special together tonight. A project like Generations is an innovative model to create change and change lives for our community and our children. On behalf of the Board of Directors at NAIA, I'm asking for your support so that we can change the trajectory of kids who very much need our help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Keith Thomason and Kerry Green.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kerry Green, and I'm a member of the Klamath Tribes. I am the family advocate for the Applegate Head Start, operating a culturally specific classroom for Native American youth in partnership with Portland Public Schools. The immense benefit that early education provides a youth are not reaching our Native children. We know that an investment in education early in a child's life makes a lasting difference in his or her ability to graduate and to obtain a job later in life. The addition of new Head Start classrooms at Generations will begin to meet the demand that our community experiences and will address the low community graduation and employment rates in the long term. Less than half of Native families who qualify for Head Start and Early Head Start are enrolled. A combination of factors make this challenge difficult to resolve. Our community has a general distrust of mainstream service providers, particularly when dealing with our youth, who face high incidence of removal. Many of our low-income families can't place a child in half-day Head Start because of transportation or employment hurdles. Many in our community simply don't know these services are available to them. A partnership with NAIA can help Portland Public Schools to advance their commitment to equity. NAIA is a trusted community institution making outsized impact among local Native Americans. NAIA's advocacy for full-day Head Start at Applegate has enabled many families to enroll a child in the program for the first time. Though we don't have nearly enough slots to meet our demands, NAIA, as a cultural hub within the local Native community, is uniquely placed to help raise awareness about these services as the number of classrooms expand. I encourage the board not to delay the Generation Project. Please continue our partnership in serving our Native American youth in early learning classrooms. I have countless stories to share. Time not permitting, I would like to leave you with this. Every child and every family that walks through our NAIA early learning programs, every child and every family is a success story. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I am Keith Thomason, President and CEO of United Way. Thanks for the opportunity to offer encouragement and endorsement of NAIA and the Generations Partnership. Last year, United Way made a 10-year commitment to work to break the cycle of childhood poverty in our region. At that time, our board gave us explicit direction to invest strategically in areas of greatest disparity because data affirms this holds the greatest potential for the fastest and deepest benefit to our community. Likewise, I know PPS to be a leader in our region in both your commitment and actions to address many of these same disparities. Your strategic plan calls out a commitment to equity and a focus on closing the gaps between white students and historically underserved students of color. At United Way, we admire the explicit commitment in that same PPS plan to, quote, provide resources to prevent students from falling behind, and to intervene with those that do to get them back on track. The Generations Project represents the fulfillment of that commitment. From where we stand at United Way, Generations is an example of modern collaboration with an equity lens. It's a blueprint for how school districts, government, philanthropy, and community-based organizations can partner to effectively rewrite the script for kids of color. Further, it makes a smart investment in areas that data tells us deliver exponential returns: early learning and housing. NAEA and an array of high-quality, culturally specific organizations are proudly at the center of United Way's cohort working on child and family poverty. Our investment in NAEA is one of our largest because they have a demonstrated track record of getting exceptional educational outcomes for kids. Yet we also believe an organization like NAEA plays a critical role in helping our region learn how to crack the larger code of equity and disparity that for too long we have struggled with. The Generations Partnership mirrors this approach in that it offers PPS an upstream solution for a population that has not been effectively supported, and will also offer replicable learnings for other districts, nonprofits, and communities. That NAEA and a wide array of partners are willing and eager to pay for half of this project only underscores its merits and importance. As a parent and as a taxpayer, I will applaud PPS's investment in the Generations Partnership as a smart and forward-thinking investment in kids, families, and communities. In close, I know you folks have a lot of hard decisions. I appreciate your thoughtfulness around this important one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our last two speakers, Nakomi Levine and Alyssa Kenny-Geyer.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nakomi Levine, Levine. I am Cascade Chinook. I currently work for DHS as an Indian child welfare caseworker and spent several years working for NAEA as a domestic violence advocate and working with teenage foster youth transitioning out of foster care. I was watching these teens bounce from home to home, homeless shelters, being trafficked, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and often ending up pregnant. It seemed as though the most important factor in determining the outcome for these youth was the number of homes they lived in, cultural connections, and whether they had supportive adults in their lives. I think it was at that time that I decided to become a foster parent, hoping to provide stability to a young person. Soon after, I got a phone call that they had 2 baby girls, sisters. They were going to be separated. So I took them in. After they moved in, they started attending NAEA's Chislon playgroup, where they were able to have visits with their 4-year-old sister, were surrounded by community, and got to experience an amazing early learning program. About a month after they moved in, I got a call that their sister's relative placement was not working out. So I decided to take her as well. So I went from being a single mom of 1 to suddenly having 4 girls. I struggled every day to make it work. Getting the girls to therapy, medical appointments, dental appointments, all while trying to maintain a full-time job. I immediately enrolled Jasmine in NAEA's Applegate's Head Start program, where every day I spent my lunch hour taking her home. I watched this little girl flourish on so many levels. It was the first time she was exposed to a structured learning environment, and she absolutely loved to learn. She felt a sense of connectedness to the teachers and the other children in the classroom. She has brought those social and academic skills with her to grade school, where she continues to thrive. These 3 little girls have become my daughters, and I would do it all again for them. But I can't imagine how much easier life would have been had we had the opportunity to be part of Generations. Having the community in our own backyard with access to medical services, the Early Learning Center, and cultural events, not to mention having other foster and adoptive parents and elders to support each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Chair Atkins, members of the school board, and Superintendent Smith. Thank you for allowing me the chance to express my support for NAIA Generations. My name is Alyssa Kenny-Geyer, ALISSA-KENY-GUYER. I'm the state representative for House District 46, which includes parts of Southeast and Northeast Portland. As the state representative for the district that includes the NAIA Generation Project, and as a longtime advocate for closing disparities through early childhood education and culturally specific programming, I was honored to serve as the Oregon Solutions co-convener of the NAIA Generations Project. My co-convener was Oregon Child Development Coalition Executive Director Donalda Dotson, who couldn't be here today, but who submitted a letter of support. Donalda is part Native and has a long history in public health and early childhood education, including Head Start and Early Head Start for migrant and Native children. As you may know, Oregon Solutions solves challenging community problems by bringing together public and private stakeholders on innovative projects that have the potential to be truly transformational. Generations aims to transform the former Foster School from a derelict site that is currently a depository for drug needles and trash into a thriving community. 1 in 5 Native American youth in Multnomah County is in child welfare, as Joe Delaney mentioned. Generations will provide a stable community and permanent family for youth who experience frequent destabilizing transitions. This project meets the priorities of our state to provide housing and services to foster youth, particularly to Native youth, with the goal of helping them thrive socially and academically. Building on the lessons from Bridge Meadows in North Portland, the project will construct 40 units of housing for foster families and for elders willing to assist these families in the spirit of "it takes a village to raise a child." Building on lessons from the Gladstone Center for Children and Families, Generations will have an early learning academy for youth from infancy to kindergarten, a community center styled after a Native American longhouse, and health, economic, and social services. This will be the first intentional, culturally specific, intergenerational community in the country. Many across the country will be watching to see how this approach can break through the intractable academic and social challenges that have dogged us for decades. Multifaceted community problems require the commitment of multiple levels of leadership. This is a hugely collaborative effort that has been and will continue to be informed by Native youth, families, and elders, as well as the surrounding Lentz community and many institutional partners who signed a declaration of cooperation last summer. Superintendent Smith mentioned some of these, but I want to repeat and add. Public partners include, besides Portland Public Schools, the City of Portland, Portland Development Commission, Multnomah County, the Governor's Regional Solutions Centers, Oregon Department of Human Services, Oregon Housing and Community Services. Business partners include Capital Pacific Bank, Carlton Architecture, Guardian Real Estate Services, LMC Construction, and nonprofit partners in addition to NAIA include the Oregon Child Development Coalition, Bridge Meadows, Legacy Health, Social Venture Partners, United Way, and the Lentz Neighborhood Association. Partners met regularly for a year to hammer out the details of our roles and to strengthen our commitment to helping children and families in this community thrive. Lentz Neighborhood Association Chair Jesse Cornett, who couldn't be here tonight, said that he and the neighborhood are, quote, thrilled to see this abandoned site come back to life. I enthusiastically support this project and urge you to provide the policies and funding needed to keep the Early Learning Academy and this transformational project on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you so much to all the folks who came and testified, as well as everyone who turned out tonight. We really appreciate it. So, board discussion on Resolution 5083. Director Blau.
I'll just say thank you to all the people that spoke and Superintendent Smith for framing this. I think the need and the intent and the justification for this project is well established. I often hear people say, think out of the box, be bold, take leadership, affect the disparities, and then I oftentimes see a squibble about tens of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars when it's a $12 million project. And so I'm excited to support this project this evening, and I hope that our 3 and 4 years of developing this together doesn't get delayed or pulled back because of what in the end are small amounts. And that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be thoughtfully looked at or discussed and figured out critically about whether or not this is the right investment and how it's playing out. But we're still the building owners to this institution aside from the housing place. And so it makes sense that we would have a majority stake in the investment. Regardless of how the operating developments are written out, we will still be the leaseholders, and that means that our partners will always be tenants. And so again, it makes sense as the landowners and the property owners that we have a majority of the investment. So I guess I'll just say I'm excited to our discussion tonight, and I hope my colleagues can invest this because clearly what we're doing to affect the disparities is not enough. We have to go at this at a different way, and for all the reasons people have just talked about, foster care, our Native families, and the partnerships that are lined up across this. We talk about all the partnerships. We have great nonprofit partners in the audience. We have business partnerships. We have the city. We have the county. This is an extraordinary partnership. The state. So I'll say thank you to Representative Alyssa Kenny-Geyer for her shepherding through this, because it has been a year and a half. I got to sit in on a meeting out at Lentz about working with the community to make sure that this is a valued project and make sure it was done with all the stakeholders in consideration. So thank you for your support of this and efforts to make it happen.
Sure, Director Knowles.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank all the people who testified on behalf of NAIA tonight. Your testimony was incredible, and I really appreciate that, including Representative Alyssa Kenny-Geyer and the mom with the 4 girls. There you are. I'm amazed. So thank you very much for your work, too. I'm very happy to be in support of this project. It's been a long partnership since 2012, I believe. A lot of people involved. We talk a lot at Portland Public Schools about our partners and how we want to be good partners. And this is us being a good partner, moving this project forward. We've had a lot of consideration of it over the years, and I think it's time to move forward on this one. The other piece, a couple of other pieces that other people have commented on, but that really stand out for me is our abysmal graduation rate for Native Americans. And my hope is that through this project, we will be able to steadily increase that graduation rate. And I think it gives us a great opportunity to walk our talk. We talk about equity a lot in this district, we walk it a lot, but this is a big step, and I think that this is one that we really need to take if we are truly going to say that we are working for equity in this district, providing for those people providing a little bit more for those who need more in order to be successful. So it's with great pride that I am totally in support of this project.
Other comments on the resolution?
Sure.
Director Curler.
So I too am very much in support of this project and appreciate the innovation that this represents, the new model, truly different model. And so I'm very, very supportive. I'm not supportive of this particular resolution, and I won't vote for it. I have an alternative resolution that I would move. But I want to say why the alternative resolution. And that is, as we embark upon these innovative projects, and as education and social service lines become more blurred for good reason. It's imperative that that we go forward in collaboration and in partnership with three things that I actually think are going to strengthen anything that we do, not only in this project, but as we go forward with other like projects. One is clarity, because we have to be really, really clear on the lines. We need to be transparent, and we need to be fiscally responsible. And so it's with that framework that I'm proposing a slight alteration to the resolution that essentially puts the design work, keeps the LID as is on the 45-55, shares the cost of the design work on a 50% split, because we are real partners, and right now we're 50% partners in it. And then basically cancels out any current formula, because I think it's too early. We don't even know exactly what the design is going to be like. Staff has said, well, it could be 60-40, it could be 50-50. So I'd like to just take that out of the resolution and acknowledge that as the design comes back, we will be negotiating a final development agreement. And also realizing that we need to continue to build on the collaboration that exists and all the partners that exist. And I think it's going to take more partners to make that happen, and we're acknowledging that as a board, and we're going to make that happen. I'm very excited about it. So at the appropriate time, Chair, I'd like to offer this alternative.
Okay. Any other discussion? Sure. Dr. Regan.
I have been very supportive of this project from the beginning as well, for all of the reasons that have been stated so far. It really wasn't until these memos came forward that we started to understand what the costs of the project were going to be. As I look at the costs of the project, they're not making a lot of sense to me. And we're basically talking about 6 classrooms and a cost of about $5 million. Clearly, those classrooms would have some community space associated with them. But even so, the numbers aren't making any sense to me. When you look at the Regional Early Learning Academy and the Longhouse together, you're talking about 33,000 square feet. At this point, what we're being told is that NAEA would control 14,000 of that. So suddenly, the project has gone from 6,000 or 7,000 square feet to something closer to 19,000 square feet that I guess we're in charge of. So I'm trying to understand what exactly, the numbers are too fuzzy to me, and I'm not sure that we are being fiscally responsible in the current state. So I am supportive of looking at the resolution that Director Curler is bringing forward. I'd like us to continue moving forward, but we need to be doing a lot more work around these numbers and hopefully bringing more partners to the table who can help get the Portland Public Schools share down to a more reasonable amount. So.
Senior Representative from Giswell, any comments?
Yeah, well, I'm in full support of this. Also, because the people here tonight are the ones who would benefit from this, your community, and if you're saying that this is what's correct for you, I see that as me needing to take the responsibility to vote yes and move forward in this so you guys can benefit from it.
So I'll just weigh in last and say I too and fully support not just this project, but this resolution has been worked out. I think it is fiscally responsible. I think it's clear and I think it's transparent. And I think we should all support it as we have been back to 2012 with a whole array of partners. I had the opportunity to participate in the Regional Solutions Project that Representative Kenny Geyer co-convened. to see the array of partners hard at work on figuring out how this innovative model would work, going through the process of securing funding for the housing piece. And I just would be appalled to think that we would in any way hold up this project. Not only is it an innovative, creative, and fiscally responsible project, I would again, remind my colleagues that according to our racial educational equity policy, we explicitly call for differentiation of resources and prioritization. When it matters to us as a district, we find the money, we make it a priority. And this project, as has been laid out here through many, many months of collaboration and hard work by our professional staff, is the right move to make on behalf of our students who have been most grossly underserved by this district and who will be well served by this innovative project. So, with that, the board will now vote on Resolution 5083. No, we're going to go ahead and vote on this resolution.
Do we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. So we're going to have a roll call, please. Ms. Houston.
Okay, point of order.
Director
So
Curler?
if this goes down, then am I able to offer my?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Ms. Houston.
Director Curler,
No.
Director Morton,
Abstain.
Director Knowles,
Yes.
Director Belisle,
Yes.
Director Regan,
No.
and Chair Atkins.
Yes. All right. Resolution 5083 does not receive enough votes to be approved with a vote of 3 yeses, 2 noes, 1 abstention, and Student Representative Jeswal voting.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion, the resolution does not carry.
Okay, so I would like to move a resolution that's in everybody's packets. And the only thing that I changed that's in the packet is to these parts here. Just
Okay, why don't we go ahead and get it on the table
Okay.
first? So this would be resolution, I believe, number 5086.
Okay.
So Director Curler moves resolution number 5086. Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Yes, that's the second.
And Director Regan seconds. Okay, so this is has the same title as the previous one, and it has some changes. So maybe Director Curler, now that it's on the floor, you could
Certainly.
walk us through
So
the changes.
just after the preliminary building estimation of 12.5 million, everything gets crossed out. It is just deleted.
Wait, excuse me. Are you talking about an Exhibit B?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Say that again.
Preliminary building and cost estimate at 12.5 million.
So understanding that all those bullet points are not binding in any way, but are purely estimates. You still want to remove these?
Correct.
Yes.
And then that's it.
Okay, and then maybe we can point out some of the other changes. Are they also under the design cost sharing piece of Exhibit B?
Yes, they are.
Can you?
Sure. So site master planning split at 50-50. LID will be split at 55-45. Building design costs split 50-50.
So that's a change from the previous version. And I think you also wanted under demolition that NAIA would cover the entire cost of the demolition.
It says here to be demolished during the housing phase by NAIA.
Right, but does that, sorry, let me look at the previous one.
This is just, this shares the cost. This one
So
does not.
Director Curler, I'm confused. We have a new resolution in front of us. Are you working off of this one?
I'm working off the new resolution.
It had resolution number blank at the front. It was in your yellow packet.
Yeah.
I think it's the Exhibit B that.
We're looking at Exhibit
We're
B.
looking at
Yeah.
Exhibit D, Director Regan.
Thank you.
So what I'm just pointing out is just to clarify for the record. So the changes, so are there any changes to the recitals or the resolution in your
Well,
version?
other than the one, we're going off of this resolution, so.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
clarifying because this
Yeah.
is now technically a separate resolution.
Mhm.
Is there anything different in the recitals or the resolves piece from the original 5083?
I don't know the answer to that question. I assume
It's your
no.
resolution.
Yes, and is Amanda here?
One thing I think, if I may offer a suggestion, I think it looks as if there's a number 6, a resolve number 6, which simply clarifies the fact that we are going to continue to actively pursue fundraising and partnerships to support development of the Regional Early Learning Academy in order to defray costs of the district and NAIA, which is the way it was before, but this simply makes that explicit. So that's an addition. Looking at it quickly, I didn't have a chance to look at this before the meeting, but I think that's the change. So so again, we're back at Exhibit B changes.
Yep.
So just a comparison with the original version under the Regional Early Learning Academy / Longhouse Design Cost Sharing section of Exhibit B, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth kind of section. So rather than a 55-45 split between A and PPS, what you're wanting is a 50-50. Is that correct?
No, the LID stays the same.
No, the LID stays the same.
Site master planning, sorry, site master planning, rather than 55-45 would now be 50-50. LID 55-45, which is what it was before.
Right.
And then you want the building cost design split 50-50 rather than 60-40 between PPS and NAIA.
Yeah, that's
And-
to continue the design work.
Okay, and then what's the cost difference that we're talking about between your version and the original version?
It depends what it costs. I mean, I don't know what the total, but from my point of view, this is back to my clear, transparent, fiscally responsible. At this point in time, we are working on this project together as full partners. It ought to be 50-50.
But if we're being clear and transparent, shouldn't we compare the savings on this version versus the savings from the other version? Like,
no, because, I mean, if you want to, and you probably have already, but for me, it's about a percentage at this point in time.
Okay, so the one I do know is that the building, or my understanding is that the building design cost is $700,000. So that
I think it would be up to that. Hopefully, it would be less.
Right, but say, let's just use that as a working figure, just if we're talking percentages here. So changing it from a 60-40 split to a 50-50 split would mean a difference of $70,000 that you're not willing for PPS to pay, just to clarify. Okay? Yeah, okay, and then in terms of the, the site master planning, I don't know if we have a number on that. I don't imagine that that either is a very large amount that we're talking about here in terms of needing to have NAIA pay more and PPS pay less in order for this agreement to move forward. I don't know if anyone has that number. Yeah, questions and discussion.
Do we also have the number for what it's going to cost for us to start pursuing fundraising for NAIA? Are we going to hire a development director for NAIA? What are we going to do?
I would assume partners will come to the table if this project is that important.
Well, but we want this to be clear. Right?
So Director Curley, you could just withdraw this and the thing will just go down. So that would be another option. So
I
mean, I think you were trying to move it
trying
along.
to be helpful in a way that
people want to be.
that continues our collective support for the project and honoring the partnerships that we have. So I'm very clear about it.
Any other comments, discussion? Director Black.
I'll just say, despite all the back and forth about this, I appreciate wanting to come to the table with 50-50 as equal partners. The fact of the matter is we're not equal partners. We're going to be occupying more of the building. We're going to have more capacity. So if we're looking at true partnership, to me, it's really contributing to each their own. What parts are what we're going to? You don't have to disagree with me. I know you already disagree, which is why you brought forward the resolution. And the fact that we're arguing over, again, $70,000 or under $100,000 just on the principle, it to me epitomizes bad faith bargaining, bad partnership. So I just, I think it's unfortunate. I heard everybody at this dais say that they support this project. And then when it comes down to a $70,000 difference, I hear people saying, just pull it and kill it. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that's reactive and bad policymaking.
And what I'm reacting to is the fact that we are talking about building 3 pre-K classes and 3 kindergarten classes at a cost of more than $5 million. And it's just not fiscally responsible. We need to have more partners come into this with us. And I hope that that can happen.
What I don't understand is both that A, you're discounting the wraparound service pieces and the community pieces this in the shared space in this model. We're not just talking about isolated classrooms. And B, you're discounting, again, the fact that we have an obligation to differentiate our resources and to make this a priority. And that's what's fiscally responsible to me. And so, it's fiscally irresponsible to continue to fail such a large segment and such an important segment of our population. So, I mean, we are going to be able to serve students and families better and have better outcomes, I am confident, as a result of this project. So, you know, in the interest, because of the 3-year investment of time, not just by Portland Public Schools and NAIA, but by a whole array of community partners, I will reluctantly support this. I think it's wrong to nickel and dime a valued partner when we are a much larger entity and one that's fully capable of finding the money to be able to put these initial planning costs into place. But if that's where it needs to be in order to move forward without further delay, given that we all say we support this project, and I believe that we all sincerely do, then that's when I'm willing to support this. I am very frustrated, but I want to keep this project moving forward without any further delay.
Can I just mention? When I hear people talk about fiscally irresponsible, the Foster Regional Early Learning Academy Longhouse is estimated to be $328 per square foot in this building. Keep in mind that this is a $12 million project and we're investing about $5 million. That, if I had the chance to invest $5 million and earn $12 million back, that is a very wise investment. So the cost of this is $328 per square foot. Our new Fabian School, which will have more classrooms, as Director Regan points out, is going to be built to a cost of about $338, so that's more expensive. The modular, just a modular that we're putting at Sitten to deal with overcrowding, is going to cost us $257 per square foot. And the Clarendon Regional Early Learning Academy cost us $267, redeveloping an existing building to bring it back up to code. So we can frame it as 5 classrooms, $5 million, lots of money, or we can actually divide it out and look at the actual costs and see that it's well within reasonable costs. So I'm not going to be supporting this new resolution.
Any last comments before we move to a vote on Resolution 5086?
Yeah, just to be, to reiterate, want the project to go forward, want to be able to justify it to anybody who I talk to, want these kind of projects, us to do these projects in the future, and I want it to be clear, transparent, and fiscally responsible. All those things can happen. And that's why I've offered this.
So with respect, Director Kuhler, who are you speaking to that has any questions about the value of this project?
I say anybody I speak to. So right now I'm speaking to you.
Okay, so you
okay,
haven't...
And I think it's the best approach. Greg called it nickel and diming. I'm just saying, let's just be clear from the beginning. We have a long process to come forward, and I actually think it will strengthen our partnership.
Director Knowles.
I would disagree on the strengthening of partnerships. We've been at this for 3 years with NAIA. I think this last minute bad faith is...
Wait a second, this is not last minute.
Excuse me, I'm
No, okay.
speaking. This is last minute. This is just happening just now.
It just came to the board in an executive session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I continue now?
Yes.
Thank you. I think this is bad faith on the part of my colleagues on the board who have known about this project as long as we've all been looking at it together. And I also believe that the numbers, at least for me, and I'm not a numbers person, the numbers for me are very clear, and I think it's a reasonable division of the costs, both based on, as Director Atkins said, our equity policy and just our usage of the building, and as Director Belisle pointed out, through this expense getting a $12 million building. We are going to own this building, so.
All right, so let's go ahead and do a vote on resolution number 5086. Let's do a roll call again in this one, please.
Director Curler?
Yes.
Director Morton?
Abstain.
Director Knowles?
No.
Director Belisle?
No.
Director Regan?
Nope.
And Chair Atkins?
Yes. So this resolution also does not pass as for a lack of yes votes. Student representative has 2 yes, 3 noes, 1 abstention, with Student Representative Jaswal voting
Yes.
yes. All right, so given that neither of these resolutions has garnered enough votes tonight, what I'm going to ask staff to do with all haste possible is to meet immediately with our partners at NAIA and work with them, and then come back to leadership, and then we'll bring this back to the board as quickly as possible so that we can find a landing place and move this forward, because I know we don't want to delay any further. So unfortunately, we have not reached a resolution on this, or action on this tonight, but I have every hope and expectation that we will after 3 years of work on this project, and given the demonstrated value and need. So it's going to be a very high priority for me as chair to make sure we bring this back as quickly as possible and find a solution that will work. Thank you again for everyone who came tonight. We appreciate your support. Okay, we're now going to actually shift back to the topic of the bond with a quarterly update on our capital improvement bond from Jim Owens. We'll just take a moment for folks to head out, and then we'll continue. Jim, why don't you go ahead and come on down. And if I could just ask the folks in back if you could just move closer to the front doors as you exit, just because we need to be able to continue our meeting and we can hear. Thank you very much. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Good evening. Jim Owens, Senior Director of Office of School Modernization. I'm here tonight to present a quarterly update on the status of our 2012 capital construction bond measure. And I'd like to begin, as I have previously, to thank the Bond Accountability Committee, specifically Kevin Spellman and Willie Paul tonight for their report. One of the objectives in briefing the Bond Accountability Committee is to ensure that they're getting information that allows them to make an independent assessment of the program and to be able to highlight some of the challenges that staff is working with. I think the report from the committee continues to reinforce that the program is aligned with the material that's presented to the committee. I also think it conveys an appropriate level of continued community oversight on the program. I also want to thank Directors Belisle, Director Curler, and Director Buell, who attended the April 15th Bond Accountability Committee meeting, and particularly for the robust conversation we had around the value engineering concepts. That's a fairly nuanced but a very important topic, and certainly is something that's connected to our high schools. In your board package tonight is the April update of the balanced scorecard. And as I've done previously, I won't go into detail around it. I'm happy to answer questions, however, as we get to the end of the presentation. But I would like to deviate and instead try to highlight some of the principal challenges that we face. It's going to be hard to do justice after Kevin Spellman just presented the information that he did. But what I would like to leave you with is a sense of the challenges that we're facing in an abbreviated format, and then try to highlight the next 6 months that we have ahead of us, and then finally close out with a short 5-minute video at our LEDA K-8 school around students who had a chance to observe the improvements that were made at our LEDA last summer. In terms of our overall perspective, I think it's fair to say that PPS is facing an unprecedented challenge this summer. The amount of new construction starts that we have is larger than the entire 8-year program, and probably over the last 50 years for PPS. So it's really significant and certainly not something to be minimized. In particular, we have 3 challenges that I'd like to highlight that I think reinforce where we're currently focused. The work that we're doing at Tubman and Marshall is very key work that connects to being able to get students and staff in place. And this is occurring over the summer. And although we've had a lot of work done at Marshall over the past year, the efforts that need to still take place to get furniture, fixtures, and equipment and all the items that are needed so that the 1,500 students at Franklin are ready to start school before Labor Day is in place. So that's certainly a very key effort that our project team is very focused on. Similarly at Tubman, you recently approved an award recommendation to do a number of improvements that will reflect how we will support the students from Fabian in their temporary home for 2 years. That work is just getting started and will be another significant effort to ensure not only that the school is configured for Fabian as a K-8, but also that it will continue support for the entire 2-year period, and that students and staff, when they get to Tubman, will feel a smooth transition. Quite a bit of effort is going into that. We only have 65 calendar days to complete the work after students leave on June 11th. And so since students are returning prior to Labor Day, this is a very compressed period, significantly less than what we've had over the last 2 summers. So we've intentionally, as we bid our work, we have compressed schedules that have contractors working 6-day weeks, a significant amount of overtime, and that was all included in the bid packages. The second major area that I wanted to focus on are the high schools. This is an opportunity for PPS to step out and do 2 high schools concurrently. All the preparation work that's gone into this effort is really starting to pay off. Having our guaranteed maximum prices in place has set the stage for us to continue to move forward. And I think important to highlight the fact that at the groundbreaking on Saturday, that both Superintendent Smith and the mayor highlighted the pivotal moment for the St. John's community and for Roosevelt Rising, and emphasized that the investment that we're making in this school is extremely important and will serve students for many, many decades to come. The work at Roosevelt actually began well before the groundbreaking, and it was an effort that started with identifying the phasing. That is a fairly complex arrangement to ensure that not the 800 students that we initially thought would be needed to phase there are now 1,000, and the planning that had to go into the number of temporary facilities and the move plans and so forth is extremely complicated. And so I think being able to get that set in place, to get temporary facilities placed over spring break, to move students into temporary classrooms has really paid off, and it will set the stage for being able to start the heavy work that begins when students leave in June. So we're really pleased that we're off to a good start there, and the groundbreaking event, I think, really established that moment for PPS. The Franklin project is next. We have a groundbreaking scheduled for May 16th, and I think it'll be another opportunity to highlight for the Franklin community that the investment in that school is going to really be a key investment to allow that school to be fully modernized and to continue to serve students there for many decades to come. The work at Franklin is slightly behind Roosevelt. We have our guaranteed maximum price in place, and we will be mobilizing our contractor, our builder team, in mid-June so that they can begin work. Unlike Roosevelt, they won't need to phase the students as they will be in place over at Marshall, but the contractor is significantly challenged given the size of that site and the work that needs to take place. The contractor, the builder at Franklin, as well as the builder at Roosevelt are all confident in terms of being able to deliver both on time and on budget, which are important messages. And then the third area is the continuation of our summer program. This summer we're trying to make improvements at 27 schools. I have 28 in my notes because that includes the work at Tubman. But the 27 schools represent another significant increase in the amount of effort that will be taking place this summer. Over the past several weeks, you've approved a number of award recommendations that we've made. Tonight on the consent agenda is the last one for the roof tear-off and seismic improvements at Maplewood. And so with that work, we have 7 large construction contracts to work with, again, over that short 65-day period this summer. So a lot of work going on, a lot of compressed schedules, a lot of staff effort on it. So with those 3 primary challenges, I wanted to leave you with the sense that from a staff perspective, we feel confident that we'll be able to deliver this work and that we have the right resources in place. We've empowered people to do the work, and we're really anxious to see this come together, and I think it'll be another significant milestone in our 8-year program that we'll continue to showcase. I won't go through these in details, but this highlights much of what Kevin Spellman presented around what to expect in the coming months. Certainly, as we're getting started this summer, we need to end it, and being able to get these schools opening on time with minimum disruption is a key objective. Something that we've accomplished twice before, so we want to make this a hat trick. The work at the high schools is significant. Even though we have our guaranteed maximum prices in place, we have to go through the bidding process for the trades. And so the buyout process that determines where we land relative to those GMPs, as they're called, will take several months before we know fully where we stand. We're cautiously optimistic, given the contingencies that we have in the project, that we will be able to stay in line with our GMP, but we'll be watching that very closely as we bid the work. The phasing at Roosevelt is extremely complicated. With the additional students, we need to be very mindful that we're minimizing disruption to the teaching and learning activities. And we have a good plan, but as we know, plans are often need to change, and we have to adjust. And the team is very much prepared to do that, and working very closely with building level leadership to ensure that happens. Fabian, lest we forget, is on a similar track as the 2 high schools, with an expectation to complete the new Fabian by the fall of 2017. Certainly on track, but as we move through design and get a sense of the cost of that work, and we move into the demolition phase for the school and then start construction, this all is important work that will be occurring over the next 6 months. Grant High School is quickly coming up as our third major full modernization project, and the master planning will actually begin there over the summer. We're currently going through the process to select the design team, and we'll be bringing that forward to you in June with our award recommendation. Again, another significant effort to ensure that our Grant High School will be fully modernized along the same lines as Franklin and Roosevelt, fully aligned with our educational program as described in our ed spec. Summer 2016 is just around the corner, and we've already begun the work to finalize the fee with the architect on that project. We've got 11 schools in the summer of 2016, and so another significant effort. And then finally, the master planning that was mentioned around Madison, Lincoln, and Benson Polytechnic is another component. So that's to expect over the next 6 months. Before I show the video at Arleta, I do want to take a moment to publicly acknowledge some OSM project team members who have been pivotal on the Roosevelt project. Michelle Platter, OSM project director, and assisted by Sarah Oakes as her capital project coordinator, were pivotal to get us to a point to be able to have that groundbreaking, to have those temporary facilities in place. The countless hours that they've put into orchestrating that team, getting all the plans in place, negotiating the GMP has just been a huge task, and I just can't say enough, I can't extend enough tribute to them for the work that they and their team have done to get Roosevelt to where the place is. And I think Michelle Platter is in the back of the auditorium, so a great tribute to them, and I wanted to thank them for that work. Okay, at this time, I'd like to show the short Arleta video.
We need something educational. We need something educational, boys.
All the ideas.
Here they are.
When I get back, I want more ideas.
March bar.
Awesome.
Give me a March bar.
Arleta School is now safer, drier, and better thanks to the voter-approved PBS School Building Improvement Bond.
Arleta K-8 is one of 12 schools that were successfully upgraded this summer. All the work was completed on time and on budget.
Hi, my name is Anna. What is your name?
My name is Michelle Cheriton.
In estimate, how much money did this cost?
This specific site is Arleta, and we spent about $2 million on the site.
Did you have to go to all the schools to see which one had to be worked on?
A set of consultants went out to the sites, did a review of the roofs, and if the roofs were in need of seismic upgrades as well as a new roof, we put them together and they went on the bond and they have a priority. So because you guys needed a new roof and seismic work here at Arleta, you came to the top of the list. We work on your school in 66 days. The contractor comes in the day you leave, and they leave the day you come back.
PBS School District has about $437 million of the budget. Did you use any of that money?
Yes, we used a portion of that work. $2 million came out of that budget. Nice find.
In the summer of 2014, Arleta K-8 received building level seismic strengthening. We also received science classroom improvements, new overhead electrical outlets, accessible sinks, eye wash stations, and cabinets. What's your name?
Hi Jeremy, I'm Mr. Sandcombe. I'm the middle school science teacher here at the Arleta School.
What are some of the improvements from the bond construction?
Oh, well, we had an upgrade in one of our walls in case of earthquakes called a seismic upgrade. We have an eye wash station in case of a spill of something into someone's eye. And then we have retractable extension cords which are great for when we have microscopes or warming plates or things that kids need more plugs for. And we got a bright new floor as well.
Thank you for your time.
You bet, Jeremy. Thanks for talking with me.
The bond project is really cool, and I think we are all happy that the schools got worked on because they did need it.
They did.
PPS Bond Project!
That was Michelle Sheridan featured, who is the project manager for the summer work last summer, and she's now our project director for the Grant High School full modernization. So with that short video, I'd like to entertain any questions that the board may have.
Thank you so much. Colleagues?
I have no questions.
We kind of, yeah, Director Black.
I just have one question. It's about Tubman. Can you talk a little bit about what changes are happening there, or what we're having to do there for the work? Because it seems, anyway.
Sure, happy to. Tubman improvements are fairly minor, primarily tenant improvements relating to ADA, Americans with Disability Act, improvements around railings. We're doing some roof improvements where we've had some leakage issues in the past, some minor adjustments to electrical plumbing systems. We have some classroom configuration changes because of the K-8 model that's there. So we're doing some partition work in the spaces. About $500,000 worth of construction that needs to take place. We also have tenants that are currently in the school that are being relocated out to other locations. And so that work is ongoing. So the dynamics of the improvements have to work around the groups as they are moving out of the space.
So, Jim, how many students in Tubman? How many students can fit into Tubman?
How many students can fit in terms of student capacity?
Yes.
I'd have to get back to you on what
Okay.
that number is. I think
That's
it's probably in the 750 range, but I need to check and see what that is.
Yeah, like a middle school. Okay. Thank you.
Director Regan.
So Jim, you mentioned in your presentation, and it was also mentioned in the Bond Accountability Committee report, that both Roosevelt and Franklin designs are still behind the baseline schedule. And so at what point during the process will we be caught up again? Or what's
Okay.
your expectation?
That's a great question, Director Regan. The balanced scorecard format has us evaluating performance through each of the phases of the project. And we had a specific parameter, a measure around design period. We are measuring against our original baseline schedules that provided a certain amount of time for master planning and for design and construction. Given all the variables that have taken place at those high schools, we've exceeded the time for the design. So we're expecting to make the time up during construction phase. So currently where we are, and we're not actually through with design currently, we still have to complete our construction documents for both Franklin and Roosevelt. We'll be completing those shortly, but we're still in excess of 4 weeks over our original timeline, so that's why we're showing it as a red cell. But very confident that we'll make that time up during construction, and that's part of what we have in terms of our overall schedules.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, very confident that we're going to make the time up. That's great. And then I had a question that I was asked to make by someone from Community and Parents for Public Schools, and I sort of think I can figure out the answer to this myself, but the question was around Roosevelt High School. And an expectation that as we build this new facility, that more and more students and families might take a look and come back to their neighborhood school, which would be wonderful. I think that's what we're all hoping and dreaming. And the question is, what happens if that occurs in the next 2 or 3 years and all of a sudden we're out of space?
Great question. We have a number of operational protocols, I think, available to us in terms of directing students there. The current plan, of course, is to construct the improvements such that we have a 1,350 student capacity with a core capacity of 1,700. If we had additional students that went above that, like many of our current schools, we would need to make adjustments to accommodate additional students. We haven't actually studied how we would do that. The projections do not have us exceeding 1350 currently over the next several years, certainly when the school opens in the fall of 2017. But certainly something we'll be monitoring. I would think the same question would apply to Franklin and Grant as well, who are going to be constructed for a capacity of 1,700.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else? Director Blau.
I just, in the spirit that the Bond Accountability Committee talked about, how difficult it is about messaging and keeping realistic, I just wanted to point out that what I thought I heard, and I'm asking you to check my understanding, is that we're confident that we're on schedule, that we can make up the schedule for both Franklin and Roosevelt, but Roosevelt will extend longer than we had thought and anticipated, but we believe it will be work that students can do while still on site, that we aren't actually expecting to be done up and out of Roosevelt by the time students come out.
Right.
That because of our delay and what we were going to do with it, we actually delayed it beyond what we can make up.
Right.
But you have figured out a way to phase it so that it won't affect students' return.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. And the complexity of the schedule is difficult to address in a forum such as this, but it's certainly fair to say, as you characterized, that we will have that school ready for all of the students in the fall of 2017. The phase 3 work, as it's termed, which would go beyond that into November, is site work that doesn't directly affect the students, and it would be done on a way that would not interfere with student teaching and learning activities. So that's very much the plan, and again, the team is confident in being able to deliver that.
Great. All right. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the video. That was great.
Yeah, awesome video. Visuals are always best, and having our students makes it even better. All right, so next on our agenda, we have an update on our English language arts adoption. Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, we have Melissa Goff, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Ewan Brawley, Senior Director of Instruction, Curriculum and Assessment, Susan Payne, Assistant Director of Curriculum Assessment, and Bun Trong, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, who are going to give an update on our English language arts and English language development, 6-12 and pre-K 5 curriculum materials adoption advisory committee's work. So take it away, Melissa.
While you're getting ready, I want to be the first to publicly acknowledge and say congratulations on your new position as the superintendent of Philomath. Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Philomath.
Oh, what'd you say? You said some wrong place, right?
I said some other place.
It's okay, some other place, far away. So thank you, board chairs and school board members and Superintendent Smith. We're very pleased to be here tonight to share with you an update on how we are supporting our students in the important charge of making sure that every student is a reader and every student is reading to learn, that we're preparing students for their 13th year. So we're going to share with you a little bit of information around the work we've done to date and where we're headed moving forward. I do want to note, first of all, it was great to see the Arleta video, and it does make me want to grab my microphone and do the rock star into it, being a former middle school principal. So that's the kind of joy that we want to see at our middle schools in our language arts classes as well. And as we're talking about a language arts adoption, and as we're talking about a language development adoption, we're looking at things a little bit differently than we have in years past. So to go forward, first we need to go back. So we wanted to share with you a chronology of how we got to where we are this school year. And then I'll hand off to Ewan and to Susan to share more information with you. But in 2006, 2007, an adoption occurred in PPS for English language arts and English as a second language. And that adoption was implemented beginning in 2007-08. At that time period, there were a number of adoptions that took place.
13 to be exact.
13 adoptions, because PPS had fallen so far behind in keeping up with adoptions over time. So a large number of adoptions took place. And with that large number of adoptions, the challenge of providing teachers the instructional and professional development support that they needed to have a successful implementation across 13 adoptions at one time. By 2009, 2010, we had completed an audit where we had taken a look at a number of things influencing instructional time, and one of the pieces of feedback from the audit was how can we maximize instructional time by perhaps converting professional development days. So we did make that decision in 2009-10, and we converted, at that point in time we had 5 per year, 5 full professional development days a year, and we reduced to 1 professional development day a year in order to create instructional time. And then we also looked at using our time differently. So we added 8 2-hour late opening days to add site-based professional development opportunities for staff. So in 2013-14, the school board approved a 6th through 12th grade language arts, language development investment for 2014-15 school year. So what's important to note about that is just the change in language itself. So back when we approved the 2006-7 materials, we were looking at English, language arts, and English as a second language. As we move forward now, we are looking at language arts and developing strong literacy skill sets in whatever your native language is, in addition to English, and looking at language development in your native language and in English as well. So how we're approaching the adoption itself has changed somewhat. In 14-15, the school year we're in right now, this is the school year where statewide districts are implementing their K-12 language arts adoptions. So we're a little behind in that implementation timeline due to fiscal restraints that have kept us from being able to purchase into this important central part of our focus. We do have this year a PK-12 language arts, language development committee work that has begun that my colleagues will share more information with you about. And we have a number of one-time investments that you will remember making at 2 different time periods this school year, specifically focusing on our commitment to 3rd grade literacy. And examples of that include a $350,000 investment in libraries. We've worked with our communities of color partners around identifying culturally specific authors and titles that we can put into our libraries, and those books are currently being ordered. You also learned about the iPad Parent-Student Initiative that we've rolled out. And part of our cost savings with those one-time investments were realized with the timing of hiring our library and media, our library media specialists and our reading specialists through those dollars. And with that cost savings, we are able to support 250 staff in June, where we will be paying them for 3 days of professional learning specific to PK3 literacy. And that investment, to go back to those 5 full professional development days that we used to have, allows us to invest in some longer periods of time where we can go a little bit further in depth with our teachers. We've also included in that group our education assistants, so our classroom teachers, our specialists, and our education assistants. I also want to say that one of the areas that we have really been looking at across our system is how do we engage with our partners around the superintendent's 3 priorities. So in my realm, as the functional lead for our 3rd grade literacy priority, one of the opportunities that I've had is to not only partner with our communities of color, but to also partner with reading partners who have focused around a select group of schools in looking at how can we network together to make a change for all students in a given school, and to look at funding partners who have been long-term allies with us, such as Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, and look at how can we leverage those funds to actually transform teaching and learning within our school district and well prepare students not only for literacy in paper, pencil mode, but it's time to go to bed, but also digital literacy, which is such a key component to our students' success. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to a video. And before I start it, I'd just like to say that here in PPS, here's what we hold dear, that every student succeeds regardless of race or class. It's the collective imperative. It is what keeps us coming to the conversations, though they be hard and though they be tiring. It is what holds us together, is that commitment to every single student. We do have a video we want you to watch to set the context for that commitment that will help put in place how we've approached this adoption differently than in years past.
Welcome to the TEDx Sonoma County stage, Todd Rose.
It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blamed the pilots. They even blamed the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force, because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. It doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size. Meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. Now, the companies that made these planes, as you could imagine, weren't happy, right? They argued and lobbied, and they said it's going to be impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, to build a flexible cockpit. But once they realized that the Air Force wasn't going to budge, suddenly it was possible. And it turned out it wasn't that expensive. And in fact, they made great strides, leveraging simple solutions that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like adjustable seats. And as a result, the Air Force not only improved the performance of the pilots that they already had, but they dramatically expanded their talent pool. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So, most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom.
So the video's poignant in that it really speaks to the work that we do every day in education. There are a few pieces to note. One, that was Todd Rose. He's a current Harvard professor who was a high school dropout. The video, you can just Google TED Talk and ban the average, and you'll be able to pull up the other 15 minutes that he shares in his TED Talk. Definitely worth seeing. So the challenge for us in PPS is to ban the average, and it is the challenge that these committees have embraced in looking at what are the resources we provide to our students. It changes fundamentally how we interact with our funders, how we interact with our vendors, what our expectations are for a universal design for learning to be an integral part of the adoption process from the beginning. It means that we are taking into account through these processes the assets of our students, the cultures of our students, the first language of our students, and the different learning styles. And when you take all of those into account, you know that there's no real option for us except to ban the average, because you can't take all of those into account and have the same fix for every student.
Thanks, Melissa. So what we want to do with the next portion of the presentation is to update you on two sort of important batches of work that have been going on through the Department of Instruction, Curriculum, and Assessment, and specifically two committees that have been really working on this idea of coming up with a more specified and individualized approach to instruction for literacy and language arts. Let me go back for a second. The first, with pre-K through 5, we've had a literacy advisory committee that has been is representative of teachers and programs from across the district. The members of that committee are in your board packet, and that group has really been engaged in a conversation, and the conversation has really been about, as Melissa spoke of, figuring out a vision and an instructional design that's going to meet the needs of all of our kids here in PPS. It's a very important piece of work because it's foundational to significant investments that we would make in the core program. Before we invest in the core program, we have to understand what instructional design we want our resources to be able to support. We have to be clear about what is the professional development that is going to support that design, so that when teachers receive new resources and materials, everything makes sense and everything works together. And finally, we want to be able to, as Melissa talked about and the video talks about, have a suite of resources that meet the needs of all kids and every kid. Not the average and not even the median, but everyone. The other group that Susan's going to talk to you about in a minute is actually a resource adoption committee, and that is for 6th through 12th grade language arts. And that group is actually looking at identifying specific sets of resources to actually make a recommendation for purchase. So what we have, the bigger context here is an evolving process. The paradigm for adoptions, the old paradigm has really been textbooks. It's really been about, print resources. And we are in the process of making that transition as a district to a different paradigm. And that different paradigm is really fundamental to how we organize ourselves in curriculum instruction and assessment, because it looks completely different. Really what we're transitioning towards and our extended vision is really one that is more about content curation. So in other words, identifying resources that may come from a variety of different sources. It could be print resources, digital resources, open educational resources, and curating them, tagging them, identifying them in such a way that we can deploy them out to teachers in a way that makes sense to meet those students' individualized needs. So it's really a pretty foundational shift that we're in the middle of as we do this work. And it will allow us at the end of the road to sort of approach instruction in a completely different way. In a much more individualized way, in a much more differentiated way, and use technology in a way that really supports that. Because what we see as our vision for the role of technology in the district is specifically, what can it do to provide individualized supports to students? Technology shows great promise in providing feedback that's quick, that can be really, really tailored and targeted to individual students. Part of our resource identification and deployment has to really take into consideration that shift. The other thing technology can do is really bring authentic, real-world content and real-world circumstances into the classroom that wouldn't be possible without the use of technology. And finally, it makes things really individualized for kids. So technology can respond to student input in a way, in a classroom with 30 students, in a much more targeted way than a teacher can alone with those 30 students. So part of our work here is really around identifying and deploying resources that make sense in that larger world of technology and digital resources that are becoming available to us. So as I mentioned already, this Pre-K through 5 Literacy Advisory Committee really is about having that conversation about a vision and an instructional design. We want to draw on the vast amount of experience and expertise that we have within the district to be able to have that conversation, knowing that as an organization we can adopt any kind of an instructional design, but it's individual teachers in classrooms that actually implement that design. And that's been a really big part of our thinking, even in the genesis of the idea of this committee. We want to support students' individualized needs. We want to support the needs of our emergent bilingual students. We want to support multi-sensory approaches to instruction that, again, technology can really help us with. And so the idea of this committee is to really come up with a vision and sort of set of guiding principles that will inform the later work of an actual materials resource adoption committee. With that, I have another shorter video this time to share with you that I think really speaks to our current context and the importance of this work, because there's really two things that we want to move forward. This allocation of resources is about identifying resources and materials that are important for teachers, but it's also about building the capacity of our teachers to deliver that solid core program. This video features Dr. Louisa Moats, and she's been an advisor on literacy to the U.S. Department of Education, and she's an expert in neuropsychiatry as well.
Teachers, not programs, teach students to read. Well, it would seem kind of simplistic to say that, but here's the evidence. we can put good programs in the hands of teachers who don't understand what to do with them and really get no results to speak of. We can take teachers who are not equipped with programs to speak of, other than very basic things, and we can teach them a lot about how to teach reading and about the language content that they need to teach, and show that we can get big improvements in student achievement. We can also show that there's a relationship between what teachers know and what students learn, although it's kind of complex because we also have to show that teachers are actually teaching and doing and implementing good practices. The best combination, though, of course, is a knowledgeable teacher with a really well-designed program who receives enough mentoring and support to implement that program with fidelity and with flexibility so that individual student needs are met. If I were in a classroom again, if I could relive my 20s when I was teaching, I would have begged for a really good program because I didn't know enough. And it's also true that teachers who receive enough professional development can learn a lot from a well-designed program. But the fundamental variable here is the teacher and the teacher's knowledge, skill, and dedication to the implementation of the instruction. It's really hard work. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes know-how, it takes support, and it takes good tools.
So our investments in materials and resources for teachers make sense if we can put them in the context of solid instructional design. And really that's the work that we've been doing this year with the pre-K.
Letters means language essentials. So because
she has,
language
Dr.
is
Motes
the
has
underpinning.
a lot to say on the subject. So. So as I was saying, it makes sense to make those investments in the context of a strong and clear design. You know, clarity precedes competence. So that's really what we're trying to do with this committee, and we have a group of folks that have a lot of weight with their colleagues in this space, and so what we see this group doing going forward is forming the nucleus for a CMAC and forming a nucleus for a coalition so that we have a lot of unity and some more uniformity about how we approach early literacy instruction in the district. So with that, and what you see up here in front of you now is a word cloud, and this is what the group came up with at one of our earlier meetings in terms of brainstorming ideas around a vision and what are the fundamental values, ideas and considerations we want to have included in that vision so that it is specific to our needs here in PPS. So with that, I'm going to turn this, we're going to transition and talk about the 612 Language Arts Materials Advisory Committee, and I'm going to turn it over to Susan Payne.
Thank you. So I have been helping to lead the work at the secondary level. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the acronym CMAC. It was a new one to me when I joined PPS, but it stands for the Curriculum Materials Adoption Advisory Committee. So I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about how we started the work and then give you an overview of what we've done this year and then talk about some next steps. And I just want to reiterate some of the things that both Melissa and Ewan have said about how exciting this work is in terms of it being really a new approach to an adoption, and the teachers who we are working with on the committee are very excited about it and about the fact that it is a cross-departmental collaboration. So We started recruiting for our committee in the fall, and we asked teachers to submit a letter of interest. We wanted to make sure that we had representation from a variety of, obviously, areas in the city. We have all clusters represented on the committee, and we also wanted a range of representation in terms of types of schools. So we have teachers from K-8s, from middle schools. Every high school has a representative, and then we also have alternative programs represented on the committee. In addition, we wanted to have a range of roles. So while we have teachers from each of the different departments, we have language arts teachers, we have English as a second language teachers, and we also have teachers from our dual language programs. We also have teachers who have experience in special ed and in TAG programs. And we included librarians on our committee, as well as an administrator from both the middle level and the high school level. And we also included some partners from higher education. So we have over 40 people on our team, including some folks from the central level. We have 7 TOSAs, including an equity TOSA, and myself, and then one of our ESL assistant directors. So in terms of the work, I'm just going to highlight a few of the key things that we've been working on this year. First thing that we did is to survey all of our 612 language arts and ESL teachers about their needs. So both in terms of material needs and also professional development needs. And then we also asked for specific input from them around materials that they want, specific materials that they wanted us to take a look at. So that was in January, and we have just over the last month, we put out a second survey to get even more input from them. We did get significant response, but we want to be sure that we give everybody the opportunity to give their input. So we're continuing to gather that information. We designed a 2-year plan in order to maximize that input, both from our teachers and also from our community members and families. We wanted it to obviously to be a thorough and a thoughtful process, and we also wanted to have enough time to include a pilot. And then we needed to set some context up front before we actually started looking at materials. So we spent some time earlier this year prioritizing the 612 language arts standards. And as a team, we also drafted a mission and a vision statement for teaching language arts, as well as a beliefs document about curriculum and instruction in language arts. And we do have a website. I think the URL is at the end of our presentation, and you have screenshots of it in your board packet. So a lot of these documents are available there if you care to take a look at them. So finally, the thing that we've been involved in over the last 3 months is actually examining and evaluating materials using specific criteria. So in terms of those materials, we, as Ewan mentioned, and Melissa as well, we're looking at a variety of different resources. This is not a one-size-fits-all curriculum that we're looking at. We're looking at both print and digital resources, and we've been using the metaphor of a puzzle, representing the idea that there will be a variety of different materials and PD that will kind of fit into an interlocking puzzle in order to meet all of these different skills that we need students to master in order to be college and career ready. So again, going back to the survey that we, and the input that we got from teachers, they confirmed that they needed materials that would help students be college and career ready. Some of the things they told us that they needed were more complex texts, so both literary and nonfiction texts, that they want to source for informational text that is up to date and includes engaging texts, and also the resources to support the teaching of writing. And then of course, we're also very aware that we need to be looking at resources that support all of our students, including our emerging bilinguals, our students of color, and culturally and linguistically diverse students. So on that point, I just want to mention that the criteria that we're using to evaluate the materials is based on the ODE criteria, but we added a section on equity and cultural relevance that was not included in that criteria. And there's also a section on instructional supports that we're looking at very closely in terms of how the materials support those students. So this is just kind of a timeline of the work that I just described. So you can see how that played out over the course of this year. And tomorrow we will have our last round of vendor presentations at our meeting tomorrow with the committee. And then moving forward in our next steps, this month, the month of May, is going to be a very busy month for us. We have 2 open houses planned. One is this week, one next, where we're seeking, again, input from our teachers, from parents and families, and the community. The first one will be held at Jackson Middle School on Thursday afternoon, and then we'll have another one next week here at the BESC, where anyone can come in and view the materials and give us input. And we also this month will have our second of 2 parent committee meetings. We have a group, about 10 parents who are getting a deeper dive in terms of looking at the materials, and we're also getting input from them. And next week we'll also be having a student meeting. We've been recruiting students, again, 6-12, and we'll be having a little pizza party, and they'll get to look at the materials and again tell us what they think about them. So then at the end of this month, or towards the beginning of June, we'll be our committee will be making a final recommendation to us about what materials they would like to pilot in the fall. And then in February of next year, we will be making our recommendation to the board for purchase. And then finally in spring of next year, we'll be distributing those materials and beginning PD with our teachers.
So just to finish up, one of the great pieces of information that you have tonight is how far down the road we have come around our 6-12 adoption process, and it has been very thoughtful and with deep teacher engagement that has shaped the direction that we've taken that adoption process. That was made possible through the board investment in adoptive resources materials, and that purchase will actually happen next fiscal year. So we're also looking at how do we look across all of our grade levels and at not only all our grade levels, but all of our content areas in the adoption process so that we can shorten the cycle of adoption and not do what is the practice of the state at this point in time, an every 7-year update on materials. When you wait 7 years to update materials, you have waited too long, especially in this digital information age. So as we look at resources, we want to look how can we fund PK5 and invest in resources that are as responsive for pre-K through 5th grade students as we're looking at for 6 through 12, and then how do we look across all of the content areas as well so that we have an adaptive learning environment.
I would just add, the adoption process and timeline itself gets reinvented as you transfer from making single point in time investments of textbook type resources to curating content, which is more of a constant and ongoing process. So that's something that we're working together with several partner districts, and also the state is, I know, taking a lot of interest in as well.
And now we welcome any questions.
Yes. Wonderful, thank you very much. Colleagues?
I'll just
Director Curler?
Thank you. Yeah, very, very exciting, and just throw out 2 cents. I'm sure you guys are thinking about this, but the teachers I've spoken with who are actively using technology and want to do more of it, the thing that they are where they want to go with it is an ability to really design their own programs, and so it's not necessarily just a content delivered via the, but really interactive and an ability to, and so those are the kind of things you guys are looking at.
Absolutely, and again, as we get towards more personalized kinds of learning environments and curriculum, the transition goes from a more lockstep approach, which is inherent to hard books and box type programs to something that's much more responsive to individualized students' needs. So students, there's an input and sort of a cycle of feedback that actually tailors the program to individual students' needs.
And I would say that this summer, so this last summer we hosted a content curation and creation curriculum camp, specifically for that purpose. That really led to a surge of teacher interest and advocacy for how do we continue to drive this work forward. So we recently started a blended learning steering committee. We have 40 teachers on that committee with a waiting list of teachers who want to be on the committee. So very much pursuing that.
Yeah, great.
Anything else? Dr. Blau.
Thanks for the presentation. Couple of questions. One, I appreciate your categorizing, Ms. Goff, that we're a little bit behind with our adoption because of fiscal restraints, I think is the term you used, and really it was our reluctance to invest in these for a variety of reasons. But I can remember our discussions, and we kept saying, but can't we put this off a little bit longer? And I just highlight that for us as a board, because every time we do that, we get farther behind. And I'm beginning to see a pattern, whether it's with our construction projects or our curriculum projects, we seem to be a little bit behind. And I don't think it needs to be that way. The second part is, I just want to highlight, and it's not news to you, but the challenge of deploying these resources where there are needs, and for teachers to understand how to get them, what they are, and to be familiar with them, right? I mean, the advantage is that teachers who know their curriculum and their go-to to affect that issue, it's a constantly changing world now, and if a teacher is constantly changing, they're having to review and update on the newest, and that is a professional development struggle, and we struggle now, I think, sometimes of getting effective professional development to the right person at the right time. Making that match is going to be exorbitantly challenging. So I just hope that the committee will spend a lot of time on figuring out how to do that.
Absolutely, and in pre-K 5 certainly, and I'm sure in 6-12, the work has really centered around professional development and implementation. As you saw from the videos, resources only support teachers, and resources in the absence of that support make poor investments, and in fact can be counterproductive. So that's really central to our design.
And I appreciated the video that you showed, that where she was explicit that really what matters still is the teacher and how effective they are. That all the curriculum adoption, you can have the best tools, but without that teacher being effective, it's just not going to be. So we have to figure out the supports to make sure that the teachers feel effective or can be effective. I just want to highlight an issue of privacy as we talk about curating, right? I get to visit many school districts across the county, and I see people doing MobiMax, and I see them doing IXL, and I see them doing a whole bunch of different pieces. But each one of those, a student is entering an identifiable something so that it can be tailored to him or her. And I'm just not convinced in ed tech yet and the securities that are in place. So just something that I hope that we're working with our tech folks about the right policies and the right protocols to put into place to keep that as protected as possible. Can I hear just, I'll mention one thing and then a real question that I'll actually let you respond to. I just want to highlight that we're coming up on an election. It won't surprise you, but at least 3 people on this board will turn over. You said that you're going to come back to the board in February 2016. Just a reminder that the board may need an update because there will be 3 people who will be unaware, although I see 2 candidates in the back that may be already up to speed, but I don't want this habit of changing course mid-direction, so I just highlight that as something that you'll probably want to come in front of the new board again to remind folks, because it seems to be short-lived memories up here. The question I have that I'm hoping to hear is to hear how are you deciding whether a curriculum or a tool or a device is culturally responsive or culturally appropriate? Like, are we reaching out for input into that, or how are we doing that?
Great question. One way that we're doing it is really engaging pretty tightly with teachers, but specifically, our equity department and our equity TOSAs, who are represented on both the committees that you're hearing about tonight. Then there are a few specific tools that are available to us that help us. Susan mentioned that we had to sort of redesign or really augment the evaluation tool, since the 612 resources we're actually at the place where we're getting towards procurement there. So I'll let her speak to that a bit. In pre-K5, we're sort of more in the design phase, but in 612, they're actually looking at evaluating resources. You want to talk to that?
So we have specific criteria in terms of when we're looking at, let's say, text resources, in terms of authors, the kinds of characters that are represented in the. So wanting to see a range of cultures and races represented in the literature and the texts, as well as the graphics and the visuals in text. One of the terms that we are looking to stay away from is a sidebar approach. That's like one of the criteria is we don't want a sidebar approach. So off the top of my head, I can't remember. There's about 8 specific criteria, and I'd be happy to share them with you.
And then on top of that, our staff, ESL staff and dual language staff is also involved in the process. And we also, our administrators and our support staff also has attended Dr. Walkie training on culturally and linguistically on literacy. And so we have trained our staff, and we include all the community members, because we'll be also sharing with the community members as well. So.
And then I just have to add 2 more things. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that it's changed our vendor relationships. Through partnership with the IT department and our procurement lead, Lynette Engstrom, we have completely rewritten the curriculum intake process. So we've developed what we call IRIS, lovingly, our Instructional Resource Intake Survey, and it requires that vendors who are asking for us to use their materials to purchase from them, that they go in and enter a bunch of information regarding the effectiveness of their materials with students of various populations. We have them disaggregate data by race. We have them be very specific about what languages their materials are available in. We talk about cultural responsiveness within that intake survey. So they're thinking about that from the outset, and we have received an incredible amount of feedback from vendors saying that that has been helpful to them. Lynette has also then presented through the Council of Great City Schools collaborative within procurement, and now we're reaching out to the Council of Great City Schools to find out what other districts within the council group have some procurement intake process options as well. So right now, IRIS looks at the output. It takes a look at what are student results and are school districts using your materials, narrowing the opportunity gaps for students. We're interested in looking at a similar process as our equity and public purchasing and contracting policy to the input. How do we ascertain whether or not those authors who are contributing to the development of these texts have a culturally responsive lens, represent our communities of color that our students are a part of? And that's a new question that the council is going to take on together.
So evidence, content, and then the approaches to instruction themselves are, sort of 3 buckets and 3 lenses at which to look at the materials.
Director Knowles.
Just quickly, I want to also thank you for your presentation. Just say how thrilled I am about the differentiation of the curriculum and the presentation. Having a son who struggled mightily when we were doing whole language. Everybody was doing whole language, and that was all you were doing. So he wasn't a reader until after 3rd grade, only because we had the capacity to have a tutor for him. I'm so happy that now all of our students will have an opportunity to have the kinds of both curriculum and processes in place that you can differentiate that. The fact that we have computers, iPads, all of the different things, hands-on kind of work that students could do that my son did with his tutor, but definitely not in his classroom. I'm just really excited, and I'll tell you, he's in his middle 20s now, so that was a long time ago. But I'm very excited to see that this is being much more specialized for each student. So thank you very much for your hard work on that.
Director Regan.
I remember early on in my career, a boss saying to me that he would never worry about me because I know how to write. And a while ago, writing was one of our key measurements that we were using, I believe, in 7th grade, as whether or not you were going to be successful later on. So could you talk to us a little bit in terms of this language arts adoption, about the focus on writing and what new tools or resources would come into play?
So in terms of the pre-K-5 work, one of the things that we are talking about is the role of writing within that literacy instructional block. We do have a separate curriculum, the Common Core writing binders that we have developed through a partnership with the Oregon Writing Project that we anticipate that we're going to continue to use. So it's within the literacy block, working out. Obviously, writing is a really important role, it has a huge role in reading, and the two feed off each other. So, one of the things as we talk about instructional design is within that design, what is the work on writing? And work on writing is integral to every design that we talk about. So, it's core to what we're going to be doing, even outside of the work in writing binders. That's just how kids show what they know and how they develop their sense of print. At 612, Susan, you want to comment on?
Sure. Yeah. The materials that we're looking at take an integrated approach in terms of both not only reading and writing, but also speaking and listening, and teaching grammar in the context of writing. So, and also that backwards design piece where at the end, you would start with the performance task, which is going to be a writing task typically for the end of the unit, tied to the standards, and then building the instruction up to that, that final task. So we're looking at materials and also at developing some of our own units, and all of them would be integrated and have writing as a central piece.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and carry on the great work.
Thank you.
All right, so next on our agenda is a 2015-16 budget discussion. So I will now recess the board from its regular meeting and convene us as the budget committee. So just as a reminder, the superintendent held 4 town hall meetings on the budget between March 4th and March 16th. The board held 3 town hall meetings on the proposed budget between April 13th and 27th, and the April 21st and 27th, the town halls also served as technically as our budget hearings. So we've had multiple discussions, formal and informal, as well as the town halls, all of which I believe we see reflected in the superintendent's proposed budget. We also had staffing that, as you will recall, began on March 10th, earlier than usual, and a really important step forward for us to make sure we do have that best teacher in front of every child. So that's very exciting. But in terms of the remainder of the process for our budget development for next year's budget, we're going to be discussing the budget tonight, as well as at our May 12th meeting, and then voting to approve the budget on May 26th. So what I'd like to do tonight, colleagues, to help organize our additional input to the budget, we've had lots of input to date, through those different previous meetings and town halls and so forth. But tonight what I'd like to do is quickly kind of go through the key aspects of the superintendent's proposed budget, just to get kind of a quick informal affirmation about where there's support amongst the board, as well as any changes that you would make to the proposal. And then after we go through the key pieces of the superintendent's proposed framework, then give each of you the opportunity to share any additional changes or suggestions that you would make. And in particular, coming out of tonight, what I really want to make sure we do is clarify where specifically we need any additional information from staff, so that they can bring that back to us for our discussion on May 12th at our next meeting. So I know staff are out there taking notes to help me with this as we go through to capture all of this. One example of an area of additional information that I would like to see back, for example, is the impact of the recent PERS decision. So that would just be an example of where we would have a quick update from staff or information. So again, on May 12th, through further discussion, I'm hoping we can reach clarity on any changes to the proposed budget that the majority of the board supports, so that we can have, the staff has time to incorporate those changes before our approval vote on the 26th. Okay, any questions about that process before we launch into it? Everybody got water? Energized? Okay. So, yeah, we could stand up and stretch for a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of just go through the bulleted list of the superintendent's kind of key pieces, and I'm just looking for an informal affirmation of support, thumbs up, however you want to do that, and then any comments or additions you would make to that. So under the superintendent's priority around third grade reading, the first one would be adding educational assistance in every kindergarten class at 29 schools with a high number of historically underserved students.
So do we comment on it also?
Well, if you have something different, I'd prefer not to have it's more just if there's something that you would want to do differently than what's being proposed.
So I want to comment. So I certainly support this. My concern is that we're still only at about 75% of students reading at benchmark. And so are there other strategies that are incorporated in your budget that you think are going to boost that? That's all I was wanting to ask.
Okay. So do you want to, Superintendent Smith, do you want to just sort of gather the comments and questions?
Yeah, let's do the commentary and get all the way through, and then we'll.
I mean, I love this idea. I just don't know if it's enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
And no, it's not enough.
Yeah, and of course, the preface to all of this
I can answer that part, no, it's not enough.
Yeah, the preface to all of this is that we're not going to get everything we want, obviously. And of course, we're still waiting on the legislature to do their part and fully fund our educational system. But here's what we have as our proposal right now. So the next one, I heard general support for that, wanted to hear more clarity on what other strategies there are. Next one is paying for full-day kindergarten in all schools. We know that's a shift to our general fund, but I'm not seeing any objection to that one. Everyone supports that one. Next one is adding a teacher in 8 schools to help improve students' reading. And that's a classroom teacher, just to clarify. That's lowering class size versus, can you comment on that one?
So it's also literacy support in those schools.
Okay.
So some it'll be direct work with students and some it's working with staff, but it's literacy support in 8 schools. So response to intervention, literacy support.
Okay.
And again, with highest needs.
Okay, so just affirming that. Any comments, additions, changes? Okay. The next one is ensuring that every school library is staffed full-time. Director Buell isn't here tonight, but I know that's something, we all support libraries, I know, but it's something. So staffing, just to clarify, could be either a media specialist or a library assistant?
So I'm going to say there's even a little more complexity in this one. We're looking at the combination of, yes, certified library media specialists, library media assistants, and we're shooting for at least full day of library services available in each school. So if in fact you already have that staffed, this FTE could also be applied to reading specialists, for instance. So Bobby, your answer is going to unfold over the course of this conversation.
Okay.
So we're trying to be flexible. The other thing is the actual pool of library media specialists that are available at this moment, given that that's a position that has been cut over many, many years at this point. There's not a ready pool looking to be hired. So we've also got to be working on building the pool back as we are building the capacity to hire people back.
So what I'm hearing in funding this, though, is that every school library will be
Full day of
available.
library services, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any comments on that?
I guess I found myself, I absolutely support library, but that clarification, what you just gave about who it is, because I also think that it's really important, if they're available, to have a certificated library person rather than assistants, which has kind of been our how we get to have some services in our libraries so far. And I'd be curious, I could be open to the possibility, I'm not sure that keeping libraries open, it's a great strategy, but I'm not sure it's our highest leverage strategy. And so I could be open to investing those same pieces in in a higher leverage strategy. But if principals have that flexibility, if they're already able to do it, it might.
There's been a school by school, and people are, regional administrator or senior directors are going through school by school and really looking at individual school circumstances, because it's very different what capacity, library capacity we have in every school. So,
Okay,
that's,
so-
yeah.
but I'm hearing
the
is-
targeted staffing is around literacy, library media capacity, and reading specialist capacity. So that's what that block of FTE
Okay.
is.
So what I was hearing from Director Blisle, though, is that you could let go of the staffing every library full-time if we were able to have additional reading supports elsewhere in the building. Any other comments or thoughts on that?
I think in general, I would want, as a parent, to know that my library is going to be open full-time going forward. That's a big deal. So I think we should keep that as a goal.
Okay. Any other comments? No? Okay. The next one under the last one major one under third grade reading is adding an early learning center in Southeast Portland. And
That's Lane. It's moving.
Lane.
Yeah, it's moving the Head Start early learning classrooms from CSS to Lane. And this is the dollars it takes us to actually set up those classrooms in another building.
Okay. Any comments on that one or concerns? Board of seeing support. So not hearing anything, I'm assuming we're supporting these proposals. Okay, under the priority around high school graduation and completion, some of the key pieces are adding teachers to all high schools to decrease class size and provide additional courses.
So, Superintendent Smith, I asked during the staffing period of our budget, I asked whether this budget and these 20 extra teachers would provide any high school student who wants to or needs to take a full high school load. Would they have the ability to take 8, period? And at the time, you said you weren't sure. You were gonna get
I
that.
said this moves us closer in that direction. It is not like budgeted for every single student to take a full day. So it doesn't take us all the way there. It does take, I think we will have the capacity for students who want to, that will have the ability to address that. So, but we're certainly further down the road than we were last year, and significantly further than 2 years ago, so.
And do you know what it would take to get there? Or
I
how
can
many-
get you,
how
I can
many
get you that
FTE
number.
it would take to get there?
I can get you that number.
Okay, I'd like to know that.
Well, there are two different things, right? I mean, so which one are you looking at?
I just want to make sure that any student who wants to take 8 periods has the capacity to take 8 periods.
Right, which is different
Which
than.
is different than budgeting for every single student to
Agreed.
have 8
Yeah,
periods.
agreed.
What I'm
That's-
saying,
that's-
like, I think we
that's-
are at what you're saying.
are.
I think we're where you are, like,
Okay,
this year.
This was our time to clarify, so I'm clarifying.
Yeah.
Don't be impatient with me.
But there-
I want to
it-
make sure that any student who wants to take 8 periods next year can take 8 periods.
Well, and even this year where we had, you had to have your parent sign off if you were, not choosing to take 8 periods. And we were responding to places where we had demand that the school wasn't able to meet. So adding an additional 20, I think, puts us even in better shape than we were this year, but.
Okay.
And as one of those parents who did not want my child taking 8 classes, and who does believe she has a full day given what she does in all parts of her life, I would not want us to be, I want to make sure that we're providing sufficient resources to other aspects of our budget. We put huge resources into our high schools. So I appreciate this one, but in no way, shape, or form, again, this notion of the full day is, for me, that doesn't have to be 8 periods. So to say that, again, for the record.
And what I was asking was whether if a student wants to take 8 periods next year, will they have the
They'd be able to.
capacity to do that? And it sounds to me like your answer is yes.
And I believe yes.
Thank you.
Yes, but that's not, when
But
it's
I'm
called a full
distinguishing
day.
that from budgeting for every single student to have 8, yes, yes.
Okay, so the next one is, under high school graduation and completion, is adding college and career readiness programs in all high schools. Obviously, that's responsive to a number of board members who have raised that over a long period of time, so I'm not. Next is ensuring all students in grades K through 8 have access to arts classes, and my understanding is that's specifically around grades 6 through 8.
Yes, where our gap was in grades 6 through 8, and we have had some schools who still did not have art in those grades. So and with the addition of this FTE, we said prioritize art if you don't
Right.
have it. Yes.
Right, and particularly in the K-8s.
Yes.
Because of the number of challenges we
Correct.
have there. Okay, so that was another one that we had talked about, and we're seeing it showing up here, so that's great. Making all high school athletic directors full-time, part of our Building Back Our Athletic program. Any comments on that one?
Does that have to do, is that related to increasing athletics within middle schools? Or is that something different?
Yes, so we both add a middle school athletic director, bring that person to full-time. We're building programming back into the middle grades, and part of what we are asking of the high school athletic directors is to assume some responsibility for the articulation of athletics within their cluster.
Good. Yeah, okay. And then the last highlight one is continuing support for students at risk of not graduating. And if I recall, this is the piece of, as grants are expiring, building this into our budget so that we don't go off a cliff with these valuable supports.
So we had a number of grants that provide wraparound services to specific groups of students, both attendance support, wraparound support, and part of how do we hold continuity of services is we're looking to not have cliffs at the end of those grants.
Right.
When they were successful strategies, and
Right.
these were successful strategies. Yes.
Okay. Okay, moving on then to the third priority of reducing suspensions and expulsions. So the first bullet is ensuring every K-5, K-8, and middle school has at least a full-time counselor. Again, that's one we've talked about quite a bit, so seeing nods for that one.
Very exciting.
Yes. The next one is supporting mental health programs and efforts to improve student attendance.
And these were the ones that are being leveraged with support from Multnomah County.
Right, so we're matching and leveraging dollars
Yes.
here. Okay,
And
great.
could you just explain that a little bit? I mean, I get the matching, but so these are, who do these people work for?
So the mental health staff would be hired by Multnomah County. So in that situation, we're giving money to Multnomah County, and those staff are serving our students, but they're supervising the mental health professionals. In the case of the attendance
So
case,
they're being supervised
by the county.
By the county.
And in the case of the attendance case workers, that money comes to us, and we, from the county, and we're hiring the attendance case workers. But both leverage more than what either one of us would be doing individually. Yeah.
And how is it determined where the mental health workers will be placed, or are these social workers?
They're qualified mental health professionals, and they're specifically targeting students of color, and particularly males of color.
Okay.
And I don't think I know more specifically than that at this moment.
So they won't necessarily be school-based, they're more district-wide support?
You know, I don't know the specific answer to that. We're looking at, like, they're trying to gauge what capacity they're gonna have overall, and then we'll build the service plan with them, with the county.
Is that something where there could be a little more information next week?
We can get you, yes, we can get
Okay.
you more information.
So I'm hoping
I
someone's
don't know if there
capturing-
is more information yet, but we can get you what there is.
But, I'm sorry, what's the budget amount for that? I mean, is it 2 people, is it 10 people? Do we have a sense of?
No, we're talking
what
like 4 people.
4 people, thank you.
And for us, it's 177,000.
Great, thanks.
Great, so the next one is supporting staff training around equity. Is that continuing work that we've been doing, or is there something different in this piece?
So we're talking about the school climate, restorative practices, and beyond diversity. So it's a combination of.
Oh, I see, there's an error in there's a bullet.
Yeah.
There's a comma, right, so support staff training around equity, school climate, and restorative practices to provide a safe and supportive teaching and learning environment, excuse me.
So it's building on what we've had as pilots. So it's continuing with our new staff that everybody's getting the beyond diversity training as they come on new with us. It's building the positive behavior intervention and support and restorative practices training for all of our staff. And again, we've had pilots, and this is trying to expand it to being district-wide.
Which again is something we've been asking for, so it's here, so that's
So
great.
I'll just-
Yeah.
My only comment on that is that we need more.
Yeah.
So if we find money, I would definitely
Keep
be in
going it, so we
favor of-
really are district-wide.
Because we really are
Yes.
not putting it in very many schools yet, and we really do need
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a
agreed.
good footnote right there.
Yeah. Okay, then additionally, the budget puts at least 2 secretaries in every school. We've talked about that one being really important support just across the entire building, including for teachers, so I think that's.
So one of the questions I had a while ago on that was what kind of professional development or orientation can we provide to all of these new folks coming on? Because I've just heard that from the classified folks that we need better and more mentoring for new folks coming on. So whether it's secretaries, whether it's bookkeepers, and so I don't know if you have something budgeted to, so, I mean, we're obviously having hopefully a significant increase in folks here.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm going to just take that one as one we come back to you with too. Like we do joint training with PFSP. We used to do a way more intentional training for school secretaries, and we had a person whose job was to do the training and support for school secretaries, and you can feel that as a gap right now. It's a position that was eliminated in a previous budget cut. It's a definite need. I mean, we would benefit greatly by having a position like that back again. And what we've been doing is much more pulling in retired secretaries to come work next to somebody who's new for a period, those
Right.
kinds of strategies, but
Right.
we would benefit from intentional training.
So maybe some information back just at a high,
Yes.
what that would cost or what that would look like, so we could put
Perfect.
that into our trade-off factors here as we move forward. The other one is adding educational assistant substitutes and full-time paraeducator substitute to support schools. This is another one we've discussed and heard about from our partners. I think this is another one where we wish we had more, but any other comments or any questions on that one?
Yeah,
More.
I still
We want
don't
more.
understand how it works, how the sub-pool works.
So
we would add more, could you, maybe you can do it later, but I don't have an explaining level understanding of how our sub-pool work other than, in terms of dollars, other than we don't have enough. So we're just putting more
These are
money.
these are hiring full-time people who are a pool who we can use as sub. We have a constant demand for substitutes, and this allows us to have a pool of people who are trained to do these jobs that we can utilize as subs. That still won't be enough in terms of sub
it's
capacity.
full-time.
It's
We're
full-time
hiring
people.
full-time.
Right, we hire them full-time, but we utilize them as subs.
Okay.
Right, so we've hired this many people beyond, but we
So
can
they're
give.
almost roving, kind of, they're rovers almost.
Sorry, say it again?
They're
Yeah,
like
rovers,
rovers.
yes.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Does that answer your question, Priscilla, or do you need more additional information next week?
No, I can ask it later, but yeah. I
No,
just
we
didn't
can,
know.
we can give you
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the time if we want to
Yeah.
have, it's just we want to make sure we have the information, so.
In this
So, and
particular
and
category,
there
this is
a
what this
pool
is.
Is there a pool of folks that we're not paying, except when we call them up?
So let me have our substitute office come and give you a whole rundown on how our
I don't know
subs
about
work
coming-
for different
They can call-
categories.
Come in here.
No,
Yeah.
we're going to do a written.
We'll do it to
Yeah.
No,
Tom.
not, let's just do a written.
We'll give you a written answer
Yeah.
on subs.
Yeah, we're not doing presentations about each of these things.
Yeah.
And let's see, adding transportation services to allow more students to attend dual language immersion programs. So this is one that I know Sackett, our Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Enrollment and Transfer, highlighted as an issue in terms of access and
Correct.
equity. So, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head the amount for this, but I see, is there, I think this is one we generally agreed we had an issue.
This was one that you guys identified as wanting it when we were in the enrollment and transfer process, yes.
Right.
And what is the amount of money we're looking at on that one?
99,000.
That's right.
And so is that centralized transportation? I mean, it's like point to point, not picking up at people's homes.
I'll get you more data
Yeah,
on
this looks
detail
like
on
we'll
that.
come back with more info. Okay.
I'm
More
sorry.
info.
As part of that, I'd be curious, I know that there was a group that was looking at transportation, and I'd be curious to understand how this, so that we don't have fits and starts, that this feeds into a consistent plan.
Mhm. Okay. And then last but not least, restoring a full week of outdoor school. Any comments on that one?
So I had one question, which is, when we used to have a full week of outdoor school, we still had a parent pay component. Is that going away, or is that remaining?
So hang on, I've got multiple questions coming, and I'm looking for my
Let's
page
not
on
do
this
side
one.
conversations. Keep our superintendent's sanity here.
So this,
Did you hear my question?
I did hear your question, and I'm going to have to get back to you on this one. So what we did do, I don't know if we adjusted anything in the current package, because this has been a patched together ability to even do the 3 days that included funds from Metro, funds from Multnomah County ESD, parent pay that goes through them. And then we were adding additional resolution dollars to fill out the week. I don't know if we then backfilled any of the other patched together sources, but we'll find out.
Great.
And Bobby, what was your question? Because I
So my question was, when we used to have a full week of outdoor school, there was a parent pay component to it. If
Right.
kids couldn't pay, they could still go. We figured it out, but there was always a parent pay component. So my question was whether that goes away, and this is just part of our curriculum.
We'll get you what the full package of how the funding, I think it's all resolution dollars, but we'll find out.
How much, do you know how much it is, Carol? Is that there?
$700,000.
700?
It's an addition of $700,000 to get us to from 3 days to 5 days.
So this is one area, I guess, so it'll be interesting discussion. This is another area where I'm not sure. Outdoor school is a really important cultural institution for our community. And I know people have strong emotional ties to it, and there's leadership development. It helps both middle school and high school. And I'm not sure that it is the most effective investment of our dollars to both graduation or to reduce our achievement gap. So I'm just inkling to my colleagues that it'd be an area that I would be willing to relook at to see if there's another investment that might be a wiser investment for achievement.
And I'll tell you, the only thing I will say on this one is the thinking here was the hands-on experience, and it was a really powerful one in the 6th grade, both in the community building, the school culture, and the hands-on learning. And then we were then actually trying to do a similar thing in 7th grade by adding the 7th grade hands-on experience, a CTE kind of experience. So that was the thinking. And this is really a specific funding source, so the resolution dollars through MESD, which we then have a set menu of what else you can purchase with that. So you're then restricted a little bit in what else you can do. Yeah.
Okay. What were we using that money for before, Carol? Or is it we're just getting 700,000 more extra dollars, resolution dollars?
We've shifted some of our dollars in there, and if you want me to look exactly at where we've pulled it from, I can do that.
Yeah, I don't need it right now.
And I'm just thinking that even, and it'd just be an interesting place. I think there could be.
We actually go through a whole process. There are numbers of departments utilize the resolution dollars for alternative ed slots, for nursing, for some curriculum support. So we have a menu each year. We go through and select the things we want, and we put priority on outdoor school this year.
Pause, staff, have you captured where we need additional information? And okay, so now I just thank you for bearing with me through that. I just wanted to make sure we kind of got through those basic pieces. And Superintendent Smith?
I'm going to give you a couple, like one other one that is with a conversation with the county is this last year we had made a decision as a group of Sun School, the Sun School Council, that we were going deeper rather than broader and expanding. However, the county then did fund additional sites in 3 other districts. So I went back and said, hey, I thought we'd agreed not to do this, but if other people are adding, we would be interested in adding a couple other sites. Sure. And that the opportunity is still open to us. It costs us $35,000. There's a $90,000 investment. It costs us $35,000, and the county would pay the balance. Our next 2 sites, and we have this as a poverty rating, so schools come up as the next one that would be up, and our next 2 would be Astor and Hosford. So I would just put that in front of you as something that the schools, everybody wants to be a Sun school. So like the opportunity is there, but it's another thing that is, we have the opportunity to still say to the county, we're interested in this.
So that would be a $70,000.
$70,000 to add 2 more Sun schools.
Not much money. Okay, thank you. So now I just want to open it up to my colleagues for, in addition to this, other suggestions, thoughts. Again, of course, we all know that we have limited resources and we all want much more, I think, for our children that they deserve, but with that obvious caveat. Anything else other folks have to suggest?
I have a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask,
Sure.
to put on the table. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not we may be going to a K-8 middle school conversion, whether we may move back to more middle schools going forward. And I'm curious about the timing of whatever the public process will be around that and what costs might be involved with that, as well as the transitional costs if we start moving in that direction, and whether that would impact next year's budget in any way, or whether it would probably be the following year. So I just wanted to understand that a little bit better.
So, and I'll tell you, we're doing some modeling right now, and I would probably want to come back to you with an answer to that one if we're really looking at what would processes cost and what kind of time frame would we be talking in terms of actual implementation. So we'll bring something back to you.
Okay.
And good question.
Okay. I had a question about whether, I mean, at some point I'd like to understand the cost of having a social worker in each of our high schools, which I think was our, sort of the Hillsborough Care Team model had included that. So I'd be curious about that. The school-wide support tables, I had a few questions. On page 28, the K-5, K-8 middle schools each have a half-time classified position allocated. What is that?
So hang on, where are you, what page 28 of what?
It's just in the school-wide support tables. I'm noticing the K-5, K-8 middle schools each have a half-time classified position, and I was curious what that is, or how that's used.
I don't know, we'll find out.
Okay. And part of the reason I was curious is it seemed that whether you had 300 or whether you had 900 in a school, you got the exact same allocation. So that may make sense depending on what it is or how it's used, but if you could just give me something back on that.
And I'm visualizing kind of a memo here that goes through these.
Where you answer all these questions. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I had a question about the high school discretionary support, and if we know, generally speaking, how that is currently being used by different high schools. We had added $600,000 this year, and my understanding is that we haven't incorporated that going forward. So I'm just trying to get a better sense of how high schools use their discretionary fund and whether it's sufficient or not.
They would always want more in that category, in the discretionary one. And two things, you've got the additional dollars that we added to consolidated funds. We have in the layer of the budget that would kick in if we ended up at the $7.5 billion number, then we go ahead and move forward with adding that. And repeating what we did this year, the addition to the consolidated funds. And yes, if we were adding more to the school-wide support tables, would principals want more in the discretionary? You bet, because then they have discretion over how they use it. And you'll note that the thing that we did add was we added another threshold in the larger high schools of adding VPs. Do you know this? So we added 1,600 as a threshold at which you get another VP at a high school. Yeah.
Yes.
But that was responsive to an earlier board conversation.
That's great. Okay. I had asked a question a while back about the FTE for an IB coordinator at Lincoln and Cleveland, and I think I was told that it's in here, but I don't know where I find that. So could you clarify that?
So we added, hang on just a second, we added the college and career readiness, both a 0.5 coordination support and a 1.0 teacher to each high school to be used as either AVID, AP, IB. I mean, so it was for doing college and career readiness kinds of support in each high school. So it was 13.5 FTE that were going towards college and career readiness in the high schools.
Okay, that's helpful. I have one crazy question just because it's come up recently, which is I think the city and the county have recently, this is not necessarily a next year budget question, but a curiosity question, which could impact us soon. The city and the county have recently, I think, enacted a $15 minimum wage. And I was curious how many of our employees would fall under that category and what kind of a budget item that would be if we at some point wanted to move in that direction as well. So it's just a general question. Thanks.
Thanks. Director Morton.
So I'm particularly curious about one of the, really one of the milestone areas, one of the priority areas, the disproportionate discipline. And it feels like if we're looking at maybe PBIS and restorative justice, the investments that we're currently putting in now, Director Knowles mentioned we need to double down on that effort, or we need to increase it. I'm not sure entirely that is going to get us, even doubling is going to get us to the place where we need to be and where we're overall lowering discipline and also minimizing that disparity. So I'm wondering if there's something else we can do. And I initially think about some of the commentary that I've heard around the need for tools when educators are ill-equipped to manage their classroom. What tools are we providing them if our goal is to lower the amount of kids that they're kicking out of those classrooms? Are we looking in any way to answer that call for more tools, more training, more opportunity for them to just not kick out more kids of color?
So I think the two things that we are adding, and we've added 2 layers of it in the budget, were additional training on positive behavior and intervention support, which is professional development training, which is developing the capacity to have responses other than asking a kid to leave your classroom, and the restorative practices, which is broad in terms of what that means. And some of this will be the addition of people. Some of it is the addition of professional development training, but really building the capacity of our staff. But we've got some significant investment to try and broaden it beyond, as was earlier discussed. It lives in a small number of schools and in a pilot number of schools this year. This is really the attempt to take it district-wide.
Are we focusing that effort on schools that are ready or schools that are habitually kicking out kids of color from their class?
So this year we focused on schools with high numbers of historically underserved students, ones that had issues but also that had the capacity to build, so that we knew we could demonstrate success, and then that's what we're trying to build from. So. I'd also say the addition of counselors and a baseline counseling capacity is also a significant one. I also think we've got some other strategies like Mind Up that's going on in a number of our schools, that we've got more schools using the Mind Up curriculum, which is really about teaching responsibility and self-mindfulness about your behavior and about how you impact others. We've got PlayWorks that I think is continuing to be an effective strategy at the elementary level.
The reason I bring it up is that I think we're already behind the 8 ball on this, and if we're not increasing investments, at least to meet the needs of the increase of the number of kids of color, particularly in our underserved, for kids of color, underserved populations in our district, we're going to go farther and farther behind. We're not going to be able to keep up with those increasing numbers, because those are the numbers that are increasing across our district.
So are there other things you'd like to see?
More investment, more dollar signs, more zeros.
What you've got right now, so I'll tell you what you've got right now. You've got 2 different ones. One that was $400,000 for the school climate and restorative practice. $700,000 that was based on our February assumption, and we added another $400 when we got the March assumptions to the same category. So that's your investment so far. And then the full-time counselors, I would say, is the other big one. That's an impactor.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I think a focus on the schools that have habitual challenges with pulling kids of color out of classrooms is going to be an important focus for us.
Good.
So, Matt, would you have any specific informational or costing pieces you want to, or just stating that priority for you? In
I
other
think
words-
that, I mean, I would look at, and maybe this is an investment if the number comes back different from the state,
Yeah.
but
Of adding
that
more.
we look at that as something
Mhm.
that we add more on.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, that's helpful. Other adds, subtractions, comments, Director Blau?
There's two things I want to mention. I think the budget has been really responsive, so I appreciate all the listening that you've done to our conversations and what the priorities are. While I may not agree with them all, they are clearly a reflective of the discussions that I feel we as a board have had. Recently, I just, family engagement as an academic strategy seems like something that's really important that I don't want to say we miss, but I don't think we're as effective at it as we could be. And it feels like it's fallen off. I know that when I started probably 4 years ago, it was something that was rising up, but we were cutting budgets, and so we really struggled with what to do with that. So I'd just be really curious about, and I know that we've tried to move our equity work out into families and communities, but what is it? And I think that this could even be something that we try to investigate with our PAT partners about how do we engage families differently? How do we release our teachers to do home visits? How do we engage communities that historically have not? We can't just always expect them to come back. So I don't have a solution to that, but I would like to see some sort of investment or some effort toward moving that direction. And then the second one is, this one I've been consistent, and this one was really motivated by my time with Courageous Conversations when we were there. And I got to listen into the work that some schools, I think it was Osseo in Minnesota, about Title VII education. Again, what they had said is, we had been traditionally doing more academic support. Providing them extra time, extra tutors. But what they found is that when they actually invested in teaching culture, so they actually took them away from school, they didn't do the academic, they really instilled a sense of pride. And I think that many of our students who come from other cultures often don't see the pride in their culture, or they have been intentionally removed from it. And so these are some of the places, I guess, when I mention places where I look at money, I wonder if we could invest slightly different. And I haven't jumped into the Title VII budget, but I'd be really curious of how do we move in that direction? How do we explicitly instruct culture or work with partners to instruct culture? Because I don't think it's just an academic piece. I think there's something else that's missing. So.
Yep. NAA was a good example of that, that we had earlier this evening.
Right.
So just to say, and Generations reflects exactly that.
That's exactly.
So, yeah.
Yes, it did. Any other suggestions, comments? I guess I would add, as you're putting together the information responses, can you be sure to fold in, Director Buell isn't well. I hope he gets well soon, so he isn't here tonight, so I know he would bring this up, and we'll talk about it in our next discussion on the 12th. But in terms of the contracts that the district has, I think staff has put together information on what we have in terms of multi-year contracts this year. 12.75 million, not all spent in this year, but they include things such as our restorative justice contract, classroom supplies, Albina Head Start services at Roosevelt, the ACT, providing that to all our students, supplemental services in Title I, the middle college program, and so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure that that information is part of the record in terms of the contracts that we have, so that we can have that full context as we look at the full picture for our budget.
Yes.
We were provided this a while back, and I just asked, so that's why I'm asking staff to provide it with the responses that we're going to get next week. So again, next week we will have a follow-up discussion. We're going to have information mostly written, I think, and I'll leave it to you how you want to bring that, but hopefully mostly written in our packets that will address these questions and suggestions, and then we'll kind of see where we land there. And in the meantime, if you have other thoughts or suggestions, just shoot them to Pam and myself, and we will work with staff on that.
And actually, I'm going to go back and just correct one thing I said earlier, because I said that the the dollars for the consolidated budgets didn't happen until the 7.5. They actually were the middle layer, so the one that we got to add as of March, it's in the layer 2. So it is in the proposal that would be going under the 7.255 number that we're at right now. Bobby, I'm saying this to you. So the extending the add to the consolidated budgets that we did as a district. So it's our half of the 600,000, the 300,000 is included in this budget, the 7.255 level, yes.
Okay, that's great.
And your differentiation is that it's not the workload committee's half.
It's not the workload
Right.
committee's half,
Right.
it's our half.
great. But
But
it's
see,
in
you remember I did the budget in 3 layers, the what we knew in February, what we knew in March.
That's great.
This is part of the what we knew in March,
That's
yeah.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
So my last comment will just be to say once again, as always, we are depending on our legislators in Salem to make the right choices and to fund our public education system. We are seeing a decline in the share of the budget statewide that goes to education. We need to get that back up, knowing that they have a lot of hard choices, but this is one they absolutely need to make that investment so that we can do all this and more that our students deserve. Okay, so thanks to everybody. I'm now going to recess the board as the budget committee and reconvene the last segments of our regular meeting. So, moving along, the next item on our agenda is the audit committee recommendation. So as you will recall, colleagues, last week we had a resolution that was submitted by the audit committee, but we had both directors Curler and Knowles were absent, so we tabled that to be heard tonight. I think we also have an alternative resolution from Director Knowles that we will potentially be hearing as well. But right now, what we have, we'll now consider resolution number 5084 in the business agenda, audit of administrative compensation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Director Regan moves,
I'll second.
and Director Curler seconds the motion to adopt resolution 5084. Ms. Houston, any citizen comment? No. Okay, any board discussion?
Sure, if I could explain what this is. So as chair of the audit committee, I just wanted to go through what this is before us today. So this is resolution number 5084. So more than a month ago, reports surfaced that showed an increase in central office staff positions earning over $70,000 annually, as well as raises for some central office staff that were considerably higher than general cost of living raises. Some were in the 10 to 15% range. So the actions were taken by the superintendent without the input of board members and have raised issues of trust with some board members and with the community. So with nearly every other employee group, the board actively weighs in, looks at comparables, and sets general parameters around the raises or cost of living increases that the superintendent is authorized to negotiate. In the case of central office administrators, it appears that comparables are being developed for various positions, but there was no attempt to share that with board members or to have board members weigh in with parameters for potential raises. So in our board oversight role, that's a concern. Staff compensation is easily the largest expense of the district. Our primary responsibility in our oversight role is to ensure that funds are getting to the classroom, in particular to pay for teachers, librarians, and others who are directly supporting student learning. So central office administrators play a critical role and definitely need to be fairly compensated. There is, at the same time, though, is a support role to what's happening in our classrooms and our schools. And so our community expects the board to manage central office expenses and to ensure a lean organizational support structure. So in an earlier board meeting, Director Curler had brought forward a reasonable resolution seeking approval of an audit of administrative compensation, and this was voted down by some on the board. It was then suggested that the audit committee come forward instead with another resolution for board consideration. And as such, the board's audit committee, which is made up of 3 board members, and that would be Director Buell, co-chairs Knowles, and myself, and 2 community members who are both professional auditors. So we're bringing forward a comprehensive audit of administrative compensation, and that's what you have in front of you. So the resolution was approved by the audit committee by a 2-to-1 vote of the audit committee board members, and with agreement from the 2 community auditors who are serving on the committee. And it requests that the board approval for the performance audit to be completed by an independent auditor. It would be looking at transactions, approvals, justifications of all relevant materials and communications related to the new central office positions earning over $70,000 per year, or any raise of more than 3%, and to inventory the year-over-year change in new senior administrators. So in addition, the audit would review the effectiveness of the current processes and procedures for setting compensation for administrators here at BESC. So it's the expectation that this would be the very first audit performed by the new independent performance auditor. And just so you know, that auditor is expected to be hopefully hired in the next month or two. We have an informal RFP out now for that, request for proposal out for that position. I think that closes May 7th. And so hopefully we'll have some good prospects, and we can hopefully be sorting through those and making a hire decision in the next month or so. So again, this is a resolution that's being brought forward by the Board Audit Committee, and I'm excited about it. So,
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion before we vote? Director Black?
This is for both resolutions if we get to the second one, if this one doesn't pass. Our job is fiscal oversight, and so I don't have a problem with that. I remember conversations with this group, with the superintendent, to ask her to hire somebody to do compensation, and to do that in a methodical manner, similar to what we had done in negotiations, where we actually looked at a 14 metro, we looked across multiple places. So it's not that I'm shirking or I believe that we don't have the fiduciary responsibility to double check this. I don't believe that we've been kept in the dark. I don't believe it was done nefariously. I have no reason to believe that there is something out of ordinary, and I believe with our limited time and investments that this is redundancy. It's something where we are looking over the shoulder, where I don't believe we will find anything. So I'm going to vote no on both of these. And again, so it just, when I hear about it being framed as folks over $70,000, we were clear as a board that we wanted better principal accountability, so we said hire additional administrator. There are some folks over 70, so we give direction, and then somehow we don't make the connection back to that you, Superintendent Smith, just increased people to make over that amount. But we in fact gave you that direction, and so it seems that we give you perhaps sometimes an impossible task to accomplish what we say, but then we claim that we don't know how you did it, or that you did it in a way that was blind to us. So I'm just saying I won't support this, not because we don't have the responsibility or the right to, but it's because it is, I believe, a waste of our resources.
Any other comments, Director Curler?
Yeah, I have a question, which is, when the last time we discussed this, or when I was here, there's the whole notion of our principals who are clearly underpaid, in my view, and just looking at some sort of a payment structure, and the relativity between that and central office, and so the notion is that you've got to have people above you getting paid more, and all that is more of a complete. Is that going to be part of this audit? Looking at that or touching on that at all?
is that the issue of compression, really, sort of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's in here.
Okay.
It's different than compression. Compression is when do we have people running into another group or another organization. What I thought I heard you advocating for, which is a fine discussion, but it's a different discussion, is it right that the people farthest away from the student automatically make more? I thought I heard you saying maybe principals and teachers should make the most, and do we want to incentivize, by making more money, a move to central office? So looking at that structure.
That's part of, I would think that would be part of, they're kind of intertwined there, in my view, but you're right.
but compression would be, what if we have principals running into the superintendent? Like, that compression is the flattening of one group running into. What I hear you saying is the cost structure, is the pay structure right, to have people automatically that are supervising or have more responsibility making more? Is that an automatic? Which is different than compression in my...
Well, but both of those questions are relevant and good questions. Okay.
Any other comments? Director Morton?
Yeah, I think a couple. I think the first one is, as this conversation, I think, has emerged over the last several weeks, we've heard information from our human resources. We've heard information that the superintendent shared last meeting, and I guess I'm struck with, I think my first question is, what do we intend to find out at the end of this audit?
Isn't that what an audit would tell us?
Yeah, what do you intend to find at the end of this audit?
I mean, we've outlined it in this memo. Have we greatly expanded the number of central office employees year over year? Have we greatly expanded the number who are making $70,000 or more? What are those positions? Are they market sensitive or not? I mean, there's a whole variety of questions that are remaining unanswered at this point.
So those we can answer, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those we can say, here are the positions that we've brought on that are $70,000 or more. Here are these positions that we have that have received a 3% increase or more. We can see that, but I'm wondering what that tells us as a board. If we're spending the resource, what does that tell us at the end of the day? Does that tell us something different than we already know? I think that's my challenge.
What I'm kind of amazed at in terms of my colleagues is that for every other group of employees, we look at comparables and we set parameters for the superintendent. Why is this group of employees any different? I don't understand why there's not some parameters in place to look at that.
We do have salary ranges for this group of employees
Yeah,
that
I
we're
understand.
operating
But
within.
when you're looking at the kinds of increases in the number of staff people that are being brought on, I mean, we should be curious about that. In the end, we want to be putting our resources into our schools.
No, I don't think it's at least from my perspective, it's not a lack of curiosity by any means. I feel like the information is already available.
Right.
That's I'm not sure what else this will garner, and
it should be a fairly quick and inexpensive
Yeah,
audit.
it should be an easy audit. And the superintendent has indicated that she's open to it, and it's a matter of public trust at this point. I mean, as I'm out in the community, I'm hearing people talking about this a lot. And when I say, hey, we're going to be doing an audit on it, there's a sense of relief. Good. Let's get to the bottom of it and find out what's going on.
I'm not hearing that, but,
Can I?
Yeah, Director Knowles.
I am not hearing anything from the public about these administrative raises. I haven't gotten one single email on them. Nothing, 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 nothing. What I see is an article in the newspaper, and I see candidates using it for political reasons. So, I'm kind of, it's an interesting question, Matt. I like, that's an interesting way to approach it. Because what's included in this resolution that came from the audit committee is far more than just what we just said about, do we have procedures in place and are we following them? Our role as a governing board is to make sure that we have the right procedures in place and that they're being followed, and that's our role. Our role is not to look at individuals, and it's not to look at small groups of people. And I guess when I say your question is interesting, it is, because I think, what do we do once we have all that information? What are we going to do with it? It's the superintendent's responsibility to hire and fire her staff and to set their salaries within the policies and procedures that we've set up. So I can't figure out what the purpose of this is. I was a no vote in the committee on this because not only that, I think it goes way beyond just asking to see if we have the right policies and procedures in place. And so I'm definitely a no on this resolution.
So let's go ahead and move to it. I'll just add, I agree with Director Knowles, and I'd also would just, to me, there's pieces in this that way overstep, they're inappropriate in that they predetermine what a response would be to an audit before we've even had the audit. But again, I think the superintendent made it very clear in her comments last week, the work that's been going on, the rationale for that, and how that's part of her job as the manager of the district. So I know I would be willing to do a limited scope audit. Potentially we'll be looking at another way of approaching this, just to be able to set the record straight for those who feel that need. As Director Morton pointed out, this information is all publicly available, so with luck it will be a very quick audit. And I think Superintendent Smith also mentioned the issue of wanting that third party to be able to weigh in terms of this question around what is the appropriate oversight and what is the appropriate role for the board. I think we could use that insight right now. Okay, so the board will now vote on Resolution 5084. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
And any abstentions? Okay, and Student Representative Jeswal?
Yes.
Is a yes. So the resolution does not pass.
By a vote of what?
4-2 with student representative voting yes. 4 noes, 2 yeses. Student representative voting yes. Okay. Anything further on this topic?
I think I voted no on this resolution, and I think I guess I just want to still continue to make sure it's at least on record that I don't feel like my question has been answered in terms of what more we're going to learn from an audit that we've already gathered the information. We've instructed our superintendent to do the due diligence and for her staff to do the due diligence necessary to create market rate positions. In that, it feels, and I guess I'll just say it, I mean, a part of this feels like a little bit of a bully tactic to me. And it feels like if this is an overextension of authority or even an encroachment on what we've charged the superintendent to do. And I have to say, none of this is, an audit is not something to be scared of. An audit is not something to shy away from. But it seems as though there's information that we have, information that's available, information that we've asked for and received, and to go beyond that at this moment, it feels as though it's exercising a degree of power beyond what I think I'm comfortable with. So I wanted to share that.
Director
So,
Regan.
yeah, I would, so I first want to read from a memo from our superintendent. I believe that a third-party performance review or performance audit of our compensation procedures and practices would be of value. I would agree with that fully. In our oversight role, one of our responsibilities is to ensure that we are getting our resources into the classroom. The more folks we hire at the central office and the more we pay them, the less we're going to have resources that are going into the classroom. And there needs to be a balance there. We need central office support staff who are paid fairly and who can support our folks out in the schools, but there needs to be a really clear understanding that they are support and that we're not going to end up in a situation where we've got too many or more than we need. It should be a lean, mean central office machine. And at this point, I don't know that that's what we have. And I want to know that really clearly.
Yeah, and I think we should be a lean, happy machine.
There you go.
Not mean, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is useful information. How do we stack up against other districts, and how do we compare? It's just
We have all that.
We have that information.
well, then it'll be really quick for the audit to do.
Yep.
But we already voted on it. But that's
So,
We're done.
yeah. So, and I guess one last piece would be whether there's any, we can talk to staff, whether information including in that memo back about budget information, whether there's, pieces about the work that you already did that landed on those salaries and pieces, we can incorporate that, just for the record.
I'm going to say the salary proposals coming in this year's budget, we've been extremely transparent about, just given the desire to see the information. And I think, like in the statement that I read last week, I addressed part of, I think, the situation of the last 8 years of during a recession, what groups of employees, we have really differential impact on different groups of employees during this period of time. It's some of whom got steps and COLAs every year, some of whom actually got steps or COLAs, and some of whom actually took furlough days in order to preserve the jobs of other people and took zero, were frozen. And the people who were frozen were the central office staff in order to hold a full school year and keep services to kids at the highest priority. And part of what's hard, Bobby, for me to listen to you now, characterize it as if it's prioritizing central office staff. That is the group who we held frozen and actually took up to a 3.8% decrease in order to hold a full school year and hold that value as our highest value during a recession. And so part of what we're doing at this point is really, we've 2 years ago started working on bringing our building administrators up, because they were held frozen during that period while we prioritized teachers. This year, you're seeing us really working to get building principals into market. You've got the people who supervise principals, who we want our principals to aspire to be. We want our best principals supervising other principals and really helping build that craft. They need to, when they take on a larger scope of responsibility, earn a salary that reflects that. So that's part of the compression issue. It's not come into central office and earn more money. It is, we want you to aspire to a leadership role. And so that's part of how the compression rolls out. But I look back, and I will bring you a graph that shows you raises over the last 8 years for different employee groups. You've got the group in central office who are all the ones that go below the line significantly in order to retain our school-based staff. So part of what I feel, just in the tone of how this is being presented, doesn't honor what our staff have done in order to preserve services to kids as our highest priority during really lean budget times. And that's the thing I feel compelled to just have as a message that people understand. And in order to compete to get the best talent in this district, we have to be competitive. And I'm going to say I'm recruiting for a position right now that a person from a smaller district who has a parallel position will take an $18,000 cut to come to PPS. Same title, same position, a third the kids. Small district. Will I be able to attract them?
And an audit might bring all of that out. It doesn't, I'm not looking at this as a punitive thing. An audit is information. It's information for the community.
This is what we're doing with our class and comp person, is the comparables. I mean, that's exactly what you guys directed that we hired somebody to do 18 months ago. And all of the adjustments that have been made have been within established ranges. So we've not gone outside established ranges in terms of salary adjustment. So I'm sorry, I just feel compelled to have that message of what our central office staff have done on behalf of kids and our teaching staff over a prolonged period of time. Not sustainable.
So just to wrap up, thank you, Superintendent Smith, and thank you, everybody. I'd like to wrap this up.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is that we'll have as part of our information for next week's budget discussion, providing that information that is in the public record already. Okay. So the board will now consider the remaining items on its business agenda, having already voted on resolutions 5083 and 5084. Ms. Houston, are there any changes? Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Director Knowles moves.
Second.
And Director Morton, thank you, seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Ms. Houston, any public comment? And any board discussion? Director Blatt.
Just want to highlight, and Jim Owens from Office of School Modernization highlighted this earlier, but I just want to highlight that a large contract for the improvement of the roof re-roofing of Maplewood is part of this. Again, continuing our effort for the bond to remain consistent, to give voters approved to reach up to 63 schools, which it looks like we're going to be able to do. It's just exciting when I think of all the efforts that teachers and staff have to go through as their building is leaking, principals, how it affects our students. I'm just really excited that we get to address this one.
Great. All right, thank you. So the board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the business agenda is approved by a vote of 6-0 with student representative Jaswal voting. Okay. So the next meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, May 12th, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.